I stood on the porch of my $2 million home staring at the fresh scratches around the new deadbolt. My key refused to turn. The door swung open and my soon-to-be ex-husband stood there, his arm wrapped around his new girlfriend. "I sold the house," he said with a smirk. "It is for your own good." The woman next to him nodded, telling me I would be better off without all this maintenance. I just smiled, sat down on the cold concrete steps, and pulled out my phone. I texted my lawyer. He took the bait. "File everything. My name is Natalie. I am 34 years old, and as a forensic accountant, I make my living tracking down people who think they are smarter than the law." Before I continue the story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to outsmart someone who tried to destroy your life. I had just returned from a grueling corporate audit in New York. All I wanted was a hot shower in the Bellevue, Washington house I had purchased entirely with my own money 5 years before I met Derek. The custom tile work and sweeping lake view were my rewards for 80-hour work weeks. Instead, I found myself locked out in the Pacific Northwest rain, staring at the man who drained my energy and bank accounts. Derek leaned against the doorframe, looking relaxed in the cashmere sweater I bought him. Beside him was Sienna, a 28-year-old who constantly posted about manifesting wealth. She was casually sipping a dark red vintage from my delicate crystal wine glass. "You need to leave, Natalie," Derek said, his voice dripping with fake pity. "The new buyers take possession tomorrow. I used my spousal rights to fast-track the sale while our divorce is finalizing. The housing market is hot and you were dragging your feet." I stared at him, feeling absolute clarity. Spousal rights. He actually believed that fabricated phrase was a magic wand allowing him to illegally sell a property his name was never on. Sienna giggled, pointing her manicured finger at my scuffed suitcase on the wet pavement. "You should take that cheap bag and find a motel somewhere," she said, leaning onto his shoulder. "Derek is just making a clean break. You being here is disrupting our peace." I looked at Sienna, taking in her designer clothes that I indirectly paid for by covering Derek's living expenses. "Your peace," I repeated calmly, not letting anger show. "You are standing in my foyer, drinking my wine, and telling me I am disrupting your peace." Derek puffed out his chest, stepping squarely into the doorway to physically block me. "Do not start your usual dramatic nonsense, Natalie. The paperwork is signed and filed. The money is sitting safely in an escrow account that I control as head of the household. It is a completely done deal. If you try to force your way inside, I will call the police and have you immediately removed for trespassing." Trespassing on my own property. The sheer audacity of his words hung heavily in the damp air. Any other woman might have screamed until her throat was raw. Any other woman might have thrown her luggage at his smug face or broken down in tears on the porch. But my tears had dried up months ago when I first discovered his string of infidelities and the massive secret debt he accumulated behind my back. "I am not going to fight you out here in the rain, Derek," I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. "I just need to go inside for exactly 10 minutes to grab my personal laptop and some crucial work documents. You can stand right over me while I pack them if it makes you feel better." He scoffed, exchanging a triumphant look with Sienna. He loved the idea of me begging. He loved feeling like the ultimate victor. He spent our entire marriage trying to shrink my success to make himself feel bigger, and right now, looking down at me, he thought he had finally won. "Fine." Derek sighed, stepping aside just enough to let me squeeze past. 10 minutes. But do not try anything crazy. My mother and Rachel are inside and they will back me up if the cops show up. That was the exact moment the real psychological game began. I slowly stepped over the threshold of my own home, leaving my wet suitcase outside on the cold porch. I was willingly stepping right into the arrogant trap he thought he had cleverly set for me, without knowing I held the match to burn it down to the absolute ground. The moment I walked into the grand living room, the smell of expensive champagne hit me. It was not just Derek and Sienna occupying my space. A full celebration was underway, right in the middle of the custom sectional sofa I had shipped from Italy. My own mother, Patricia, was holding a crystal flute, laughing loudly at something Derek just said. Next to her was my younger sister, Rachel. They were practically glowing with excitement, completely ignoring the fact that I had just been locked out of my own house in the rain. The only person who looked completely out of place was Kendrick, my brother-in-law. He stood near the marble fireplace with his arms tightly crossed over his chest. As a black man who had worked his way up to become one of the most respected real estate appraisers in Seattle, Kendrick had a razor-sharp radar for nonsense. He caught my eye immediately and gave a subtle shake of his head. He looked deeply uncomfortable, like he was trapped in a room full of people holding live grenades. "Oh, look who finally decided to join us, my mother," Patricia said, turning toward me. She did not look sympathetic. She did not ask why I was soaking wet. Instead, she walked right past me to pull Derek into a massive hug. "You are such a genius, Derek," she cooed, patting his back. "The son I always wanted." "Truly." I stood dripping onto the hardwood floor. My mother had always preferred men who made a lot of noise over women who quietly did the work. Growing up, she treated Rachel like a fragile princess because Rachel knew how to play the helpless victim to get what she wanted. I was the workhorse. I paid my own way through college, got my CPA, and built a lucrative career in forensic accounting. But to my mother, success only mattered if it came with a loud, flashy presentation. Derek was her ideal man, a walking billboard of fake wealth. "I just need to get my work laptop," I said, keeping my voice painfully even. "Do not track mud on the rug," Rachel chimed in, holding up her wrist to inspect her nails. "The new owners are doing a final walkthrough tomorrow, and we want it looking pristine." I looked at my sister. The sheer delusion in her voice was staggering. Rachel had not worked a full-time job in 3 years. She and Kendrick lived comfortably solely because Kendrick worked 70-hour weeks while she scrolled through social media, complaining about being a stressed mom to their toddler. I walked toward the hallway leading to my home office, but Derek stepped in front of me again. "Not so fast, Natalie. We have some family business to conclude first." He gestured grandly to the coffee table where a leather-bound checkbook sat next to an ice bucket. Sienna giggled and poured herself another glass of my vintage champagne. "Derek was kind enough to include us in his new investment portfolio," Patricia said, puffing out her chest. "Since you were so utterly difficult during the divorce proceedings, he could have cut us off entirely. But he is a bigger person than you are, Natalie. He actually cares about this family." Rachel held up her left arm. The overhead lights caught the diamonds on a brand new Rolex Daytona. "Is it not gorgeous?" she squealed. Derek gave Mom and me an advance on the real estate profits, $200,000 each, to invest directly into his new crypto hedge fund. This watch was just a little signing bonus. I glanced at Kendrick. His jaw was clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. He knew exactly what I knew. Derek did not have a registered crypto fund. Derek had a flashy website and a habit of defrauding vulnerable people. Patricia walked over to the coffee table, picked up a slip of paper, and shoved it directly into my chest. It fluttered to the floor, landing by my wet shoes. "Take that and go rent a studio apartment somewhere," Patricia said, her voice dripping with disdain. "It is a check for $10,000. Derek is giving it to you out of the goodness of his heart so you do not end up on the street. Take it, sign the final divorce waiver, and let us celebrate in peace. You should have been a better wife, Natalie. Maybe then you would not be begging for scraps." I looked down at the check. $10,000. He was offering me $10,000 of my own stolen money to walk away from a $2 million estate. I did not pick it up. Instead, I slowly looked up, meeting my mother's cold eyes, and then shifting my gaze to my sister's gloating face. I let a long, heavy silence fill the room. "You know what is really funny about this little party?" I finally said, my voice slicing through the room like a scalpel. "You are all standing here toasting to Derek's generosity. But Derek has not had a legitimate income in over 2 years. Derek's face flushed red. "Shut up, Natalie," he snapped, taking a step toward me. I held my ground, unblinking. "That champagne you are drinking," I continued, pointing at Sienna Glass. "I bought that in Napa Valley 3 years ago." "That Rolex on your wrist, Rachel, I paid off the credit card Derek used to buy it because his score was too low to qualify for a piece of plastic, let alone a luxury watch. And that car you drove here in, Rachel, the SUV you love so much, I made the down payment on that too." The entire living room went dead silent. The smirk melted right off Rachel's face. Patricia opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "Derek is not a self-made millionaire," I said, looking directly at my mother. "He is a parasite. And right now, he is feeding on you." Kendrick let out a low whistle from the corner. "I told you, Rachel," he said, his deep voice echoing in the quiet room. "I told you something was wrong with this deal." "Shut your mouth, Kendrick," Rachel shrieked, turning her panic onto her husband. "Derek is a genius. You are just jealous because you appraise houses for a living while he is making real moves." Kendrick shook his head, looking at his wife with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Derek, how exactly did you sell a house that only has Natalie's name on the deed?" he asked, stepping away from the wall. "I pulled the property records this morning. Natalie bought this place before she even met you." Derek swallowed hard, his Adam apple bobbing. He suddenly looked very small in his expensive sweater. "Spousal rights," he stammered. "It is a community property state, Kendrick. You would not understand high-level real estate law." "I understand fraud," Kendrick replied flatly. "Get out!" Derek yelled, pointing a shaking finger at the front door. "Get out right now, Natalie. I am calling the cops. You are trespassing and you are harassing my investors." I smiled, picking up my suitcase handle. I did not need to go to my office anymore. Everything I needed was already backed up on a secure cloud server, and my lawyer had just received the green light to drop the hammer. "Do not worry, Derek," I said, turning my back on them. "I am leaving. Enjoy the house while you can." I walked out into the rain, leaving the $10,000 check on the floor. Sitting in my car, I opened my laptop and pulled up the county clerk portal. The deed transfer was fully processed. There was my signature, looking flawless and completely forged. I smiled, took a screenshot, and sent it directly to the lead federal investigator I had been working with for 6 months. The trap was set, and they had all walked right in. I woke up the next morning in a luxury suite at the Fairmont Hotel in downtown Seattle. I had booked it the night before using a secure corporate account that Derek knew absolutely nothing about. The morning rain was beating against the floor-to-ceiling windows, but inside my suite, everything was quiet and controlled. I went down to the hotel cafe to get a double espresso. I handed the barista my personal platinum credit card. Declined. I handed her a second debit card tied to my checking account. Declined. The barista looked apologetic, but I just smiled calmly and used my corporate card instead. Sitting at a corner table overlooking the gray waterfront, I opened my banking app. Every single joint account we shared was drained down to zero. Even worse, my personal lines of credit had been maxed out with massive cash advances. Derek had used the forged deed and his supposed spousal rights to freeze my financial access completely. He wanted to suffocate me financially so I could not afford to hire a lawyer to fight back. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text message from Derek. "Morning, Natalie. Just doing some administrative cleanup. Since you are so good at paying for things, I figured you could handle your own expenses from now on. Good luck paying for court fees with $0 in your bank account." I did not reply to his taunt. I simply took a screenshot of the text message and forwarded it directly to Agent Miller, the federal investigator I had been collaborating with for the past 6 months. By draining the accounts, using a forged document across state lines, Derek had just elevated his crimes from standard fraud to federal wire fraud. Every arrogant move he made was digging his grave deeper. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a secure encrypted message from Kendrick. He wanted to meet immediately. I gave him the address of a quiet diner a few miles away from my hotel. When I walked in 20 minutes later, Kendrick was already sitting in a back booth, looking like he had not slept in a week. He ordered a black coffee and pushed it around with a spoon, staring blankly at the table. "You look way too calm for a woman who just lost her $2 million house and all her money," Kendrick said, studying my face as I sat down across from him. "I pulled more records last night, Natalie. Derek is soliciting the whole family to dump the house money into an unregistered crypto fund. He is promising a guaranteed 40% return in 3 months. I told Rachel it is a textbook Ponzi scheme, but your mother called me a paranoid idiot who does not understand modern investing." "What did Rachel say?" I asked, taking a sip of my coffee. "She told me I was holding her back." Kendrick sighed, rubbing his temples in frustration. "She actually said I should learn how to hustle like Derek. Natalie, the man does not even have a broker license. I checked the state registry this morning. This fund does not exist. They are going to lose everything." "You are a good man, Kendrick," I said, pulling a thick manila folder out of my briefcase and sliding it across the diner table. "You are the only person in that toxic house who actually works for a living. That is why I am giving you this." Kendrick opened the folder cautiously. Inside was a printed email chain from the Internal Revenue Service and a preliminary injunction drafted by my legal team. His eyes went wide as he read the highlighted sections detailing the criminal investigation into Derek financial history. "Do not try to stop them anymore, Kendrick," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. "Let my mother and Rachel transfer all the money they want to Derek. But you need to protect yourself and your son. Do not put your name on a single document. Do not let Rachel forge your signature on any home equity loans to give him cash. Keep your finances completely separate starting today." Kendrick looked up from the papers, his expression shifting from sheer exhaustion to absolute disbelief. "You are not just trying to get your house back," he whispered, realizing the true magnitude of what he was looking at. "You are letting him build a federal case against himself." "I am just letting Derek be Derek," I replied evenly. "He wanted to take everything from me. I am just making sure the federal government knows exactly where he puts it." We finished our coffee in silence. Kendrick left the diner looking shaken but resolute. He knew what he had to do. As I was walking back to my car, my phone vibrated with a notification from social media. Derek had just posted a public video. I tapped the screen and there was my soon-to-be ex-husband leaning against a brand-new silver Porsche 911. The caption read, "Feeling blessed with my beautiful Sienna. Upgrading my life and leaving the dead weight behind. Please send prayers for my destitute ex-wife Natalie, who lost her mind and her house in our divorce." He even included a fake GoFundMe link to mock me. The sheer audacity of his public smear campaign was breathtaking. I stared at the video of Derek and Sienna posing by the Porsche, feeling a strange sense of clinical detachment. My phone rang, interrupting the video. It was Rachel. I tapped the screen to answer and simultaneously pressed the record button on my secondary work phone. "Have you seen Derek post?" Rachel asked, her voice practically vibrating with glee. "He is doing so well, Natalie. You really dragged him down. Anyway, I am calling because Mom and I were talking. Since you are basically homeless now and living out of your suitcase, you do not need Dad old vintage Mustang. Derek wants to restore it. You need to sign the title over to him as a thank you for the money he gave us." I kept my voice perfectly neutral. "You want me to give my cheating ex-husband the car Dad left me?" "Do not be so dramatic," Rachel scoffed. "You always cared more about your stupid spreadsheets than this family. Mom always knew you were too cold to be a real woman. That is why Derek left you. By the way, Sienna is pregnant. They are starting a real family. The least you can do is give them the car." Sienna is pregnant. I let that piece of information settle. Derek had a secret child on the way while draining my bank accounts. "Good to know," I said. "I am not signing the car over Rachel. Have a great day." I hung up the phone and saved the audio file to my encrypted drive. Rachel had just explicitly admitted on a recorded line that she received a massive cash payout from a fraudulent real estate transaction. She thought she was hurting my feelings, but she was just handing me another piece of federal evidence. Just as I put my phone down, a high-priority email pinged in my inbox. It was from Barbara, the managing partner at my forensic accounting firm. The subject line read, "Urgent meeting required. Board complaint filed." Derek was not just trying to steal my assets, he was trying to destroy my career. I drove downtown to my firm office suite on the 40th floor. The sleek glass and steel environment was my true home. When I walked into Barbara Corner office, she was sitting behind her massive mahogany desk holding a thick stack of printed papers. "Have a seat, Natalie," Barbara said, her face completely unreadable. I sat down, crossing my legs. "I assume Derek made a move?" I asked. Barbara slid the papers across the desk. "Your ex-husband filed a formal complaint with the state licensing board this morning. He claims you embezzled funds from his investment business to buy your Bellevue house and that you are currently using your position at this firm to hide stolen money. He is demanding an immediate suspension of your CPA license." I looked down at the complaint. It was filled with blatant lies, fabricated ledgers, and desperate accusations. He wanted me fired and discredited so I could never testify against him. I looked up at Barbara. As a forensic accountant, I knew a board complaint was a serious threat. It could derail a career even if proven false. Barbara stared at me for a long moment. Then a slow, sharp smile spread across her face. She burst out laughing, leaning back in her leather chair. "The absolute arrogance of this man," Barbara said, shaking her head. "He actually tried to weaponize a forensic accounting firm against its own senior investigator. I spoke with our legal team this morning. We are obviously ignoring this garbage. In fact, I am giving you full access to the firm proprietary investigative software. You take whatever time and resources you need to finish building your federal case against him. Nail him to the wall, Natalie." "Thank you, Barbara," I said, feeling a surge of genuine gratitude. I left her office and immediately took the elevator down to the 12th floor to meet with my personal attorney, Jonathan. I walked into his conference room and dropped my briefcase on the table. "Tell me we are ready," I said. Jonathan smiled, pulling out a thick binder. "We are more than ready. I reviewed the deed transfer Derek filed with the county. It is a masterpiece of stupidity. Here is the secret Derek did not know. 6 months ago, when I first suspected he was hiding debt, I did not just sit around crying. I took action to protect my biggest asset. I legally transferred the $2 million Bellevue house into a revocable living trust. I am the sole trustee and the sole beneficiary. By law, the house was no longer owned by an individual named Natalie. It was owned by the trust. Derek Forge's signature on a standard residential deed transfer was completely void because he could not legally sell an asset owned by a trust he had no legal access to. He thinks he sold the house, Jonathan said, tapping the forged deed. But legally, the transaction is a ghost. The title company pushed it through because they relied on his fraudulent spousal consent forms, but it will not hold up in any federal court. "And what about the buyer?" Jonathan asked, leaning back in his heavy leather chair. "Apex Holdings, LLC. Have you traced who actually owns it?" I could not help but smile. "I do not need to trace it, Jonathan. I created it." He stared at me, his pen freezing in midair. The silence in the room was thick. 6 months ago, I explained I set up Apex Holdings as a blind shell company registered in Delaware. When Derek decided to illegally sell my house, he used a shady online real estate broker who never properly verified the ultimate beneficial owner of the purchasing entity. He essentially sold my house to me. The money he received came from a private hard money loan I secured, which means every single dollar he took from that sale is completely federally tracked and completely illegitimate. Jonathan started laughing, shaking his head in sheer disbelief. "You let him steal his own trap. This is brilliant." "Exactly," I said. My phone vibrated loudly on the conference table. It was a picture message from my mother, Patricia. I opened it and felt a brief flash of genuine pity before the cold reality set in. It was a photo of a finalized second mortgage agreement. The text beneath it read, "This is what family loyalty looks like. I just pulled $500,000 in equity from my house to invest in Derek New Fund. You could have been a millionaire by the end of the year if you had just supported your husband. Learn from Sienna." I replied with a single thumbs up emoji. I was not going to stop her from ruining her own life. She had made her choice entirely on her own, and she would have to live with the devastating consequences. Before I could even put the phone down into my purse, it rang. It was Kendrick. He was breathing heavily, sounding like he was pacing back and forth in a quiet room. "I am done, Natalie," he said, his voice thick with anger and deep betrayal. "I just caught Rachel trying to forge my signature on a home equity line of credit application. She was trying to drain the equity from our family home to give cash to Derek." I packed my bags. I am taking our son, and I am going to my sister place. I filed for divorce online an hour ago. "I am so sorry, Kendrick," I said, truly meaning it. He was a good father and a hard worker. He did not deserve the absolute madness of my toxic family. "Do you have a secure place to stay tonight?" "Yes," he replied. "But they have all completely lost their minds." Rachel screamed at me, calling me a cowardly black man who does not know how to hustle. I told her the only thing she was hustling toward was a federal prison sentence. "Keep your finances completely separate and do not answer any of her calls." I advised, keeping my tone professional but warm. "I will tell you exactly where to be on Friday night. You are going to want to see how this ends." I left Jonathan's office feeling a deep sense of calm. I drove back to the Fairmont Hotel, but as I walked through the opulent lobby, I saw a familiar figure waiting near the elevators. It was Sienna. She was wearing a beige trench coat and carrying a brand new Hermes Birkin bag that cost more than most people made in a year. When she saw me, she marched over, looking incredibly smug. "I brought you something," Natalie, Sienna said, shoving a folded piece of paper into my hand. It was a poorly drafted cease and desist letter printed on cheap printer paper. "Derek, lawyer, drafted this. If you keep harassing our family, we are going to sue you for emotional distress. You need to stop contacting your mother and Rachel. They are done with your toxic energy." I looked at the piece of paper and then down at her bag. "That is a beautiful Birkin," I said, completely ignoring her empty legal threat. "Blue Nui Togo leather with palladium hardware. Did Derek buy that for you today?" Sienna puffed out her chest, stroking the expensive leather. "Yes, he did. He treats his woman like a queen. Something you clearly know nothing about. Enjoy your sad little hotel room." "I will," I said, smiling genuinely. "Just make sure you keep the receipt for that bag, Sienna. Federal agents are very particular about logging material evidence." She blinked, looking momentarily confused, but then scoffed and walked away, her heels clicking loudly on the marble floor. She had no idea she was carrying around $30,000 of stolen wire fraud money. When I got up to my suite, there was a thick gold leaf envelope slipped under the door. I opened it. It was an extravagant invitation to the official launch dinner of the Family Investment Fund, hosted by Derek and Rachel. It was being held at an elite five-star restaurant on the waterfront this Friday night. My phone chimed with another text from Patricia. "Come to the dinner. Apologize in front of everyone, and Derek might hire you as his secretary. It is your last chance to be part of this family." I tossed the phone onto the bed. I was going to the dinner, all right. I opened my laptop and ordered a stunning $3,000 crimson dress. I was going to walk straight into the lion den, and I was going to burn it all to the absolute ground. The days leading up to Friday were a masterclass in silent preparation. I did not text my mother back. I did not answer Rachel calls. Instead, I sat in my firm's secure conference room with my legal team and Agent Miller from the FBI. We mapped out every single fraudulent wire transfer. We tracked the $500,000 my mother pulled from her home equity. We watched it move from Derek account into an offshore shell company that was already flagged for money laundering. The trap was not just set, it was sealed in reinforced steel. By Friday afternoon, my $3,000 crimson dress arrived. I slipped it on and looked in the mirror. I did not look like a heartbroken ex-wife. I looked like a financial executioner. I drove to the waterfront where the five-star restaurant was located. The valet took my car and I walked through the heavy mahogany doors. The private banquet room was located at the back, overlooking the Puget Sound. I could hear the loud, arrogant laughter of my family before I even saw them. I pushed the double doors open and stepped inside. The room was packed with my extended family, local business owners, and a few naive investors Derek had managed to reel in. Waiters in crisp white shirts circulated with silver trays carrying expensive champagne. The moment I walked in, the ambient noise in the room noticeably dropped. Heads turned. I saw my mother, Patricia, standing near the ice sculpture, her jaw practically hitting the floor. She had expected me to show up in sweatpants with puffy eyes begging for my life back. Instead, I was wearing a silk gown that cost more than her first car with my hair and makeup professionally done. Rachel was standing next to her, tightly clutching her new Rolex. The smug smile she had been wearing instantly vanished. She leaned in and whispered something vicious to my mother, but I just smiled brightly and waved at them. Derek was holding court near the private bar. He had a glass of scotch in one hand and his other arm was draped around Sienna. When he saw me, his face flushed with a toxic mixture of anger and panic. Sienna immediately grabbed his arm, her eyes darting over my dress with pure, venomous jealousy. She was wearing a cheap knockoff designer gown that looked terribly out of place next to the genuine luxury I was wearing. Derek put his drink down and marched directly toward me, cutting through the crowd. "What do you think you are doing here, Natalie?" he hissed, grabbing my elbow tightly. I calmly looked down at his hand until he released his grip. "You invited me, Derek," I said, pulling the gold leaf invitation from my clutch. "My mother said you might have a job opening for a secretary. I figured I would come see what the family investment fund is all about." Derek glanced around nervously, making sure none of his wealthy marks were listening. "You are out of your mind if you think you are staying," he muttered, stepping closer to block my path. "I am launching a multi-million-dollar enterprise tonight. I do not need my bitter ex-wife ruining the vibe. But since you are here, let us handle this like adults." He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a folded legal document. He shoved it into my hands just like my mother had shoved that pathetic check at me days ago. "Sign this right now," Derek ordered, his voice trembling with forced authority. "It is a post-divorce waiver. It officially renounces any claim you might try to make on my new business or the profits from the Bellevue house sale. If you sign it right here, right now, I will wire $50,000 into your account by Monday. I will give you the money to start over. Do not be stupid, Natalie. You have absolutely nothing left. Take the lifeline and walk away." I slowly unfolded the document. It was drafted by a budget lawyer desperately trying to plug the massive legal holes Derek had dug for himself. It was completely useless. The house belonged to a federal trust, and the money he was offering me was stolen. I looked back up at Derek. His eyes were wide, filled with that classic narcissistic desperation. He needed me to submit to validate his entire stolen existence. I folded the paper neatly and slipped it into my clutch. "I am not signing anything right now, Derek," I said with a terrifyingly calm smile. "I want to see the presentation first. I want to see exactly how successful you have become." Before he could argue, Patricia and Sienna walked up, flanking him like two loyal guard dogs ready to attack. They glared at me with pure hatred, completely unaware that the federal agents were already outside waiting for my signal. Patricia crossed her arms, her heavy gold bracelets clinking loudly over the low hum of the restaurant chatter. "What is she doing here, Derek?" she demanded, acting as if I was an uninvited pest who had crawled in from the street. "I thought you told the venue staff to keep the riffraff out of our private event." "I am leaving as soon as I see the presentation," I replied smoothly, holding my clutch with both hands. I would not miss this for the world. Rachel pushed her way through the small crowd of onlookers to join our little circle. She was wearing the Rolex she bought with my stolen money and a smug expression that perfectly mirrored our mother. She looked me up and down, taking in the crimson dress. "You really love making a scene, Natalie," Rachel sneered. "I hope you at least brought the title to Dad Vintage Mustang like I asked you to. Derek is going to restore it for the baby." I raised an eyebrow. "For the baby?" "Yes," Rachel said proudly, puffing out her chest. She looped her arm through Sienna's free arm. "Mom always knew you were too obsessed with your career to be a real woman. You could not even give Derek a child. But Sienna is already pregnant. They are starting a real family together. A family that actually supports each other." Patricia nodded vigorously in agreement. "That is right, Rachel," she said. "A woman's true purpose is to nurture, not to sit in an office calculating numbers all day." Derek needed a warm home and you gave him nothing but cold ambition, Natalie. You drove him into the arms of a better woman. The least you can do is sign over the car title as a thank you for the generous settlement he offered you. The sheer audacity of her words hung in the air. Rachel was the golden child, the one who had been spoon-fed every advantage while I worked late nights to pay for her mistakes. Now she was standing in a room paid for by my stolen assets, demanding the last sentimental heirloom my father had left me, just to appease my fraudulent ex-husband. "You are delusional, Rachel," I said, my voice dropping to a low, icy register. "Kendrick was right to walk out on you." Rachel's face twisted in sudden fury at the mention of her husband. "Kendrick is a coward!" she hissed loudly, drawing a few glances from nearby tables. "He does not understand high-level finance. He is too scared to take risks. But Derek is making us rich. He will see that I was the smart one all along. I am securing our son's financial future while he just appraises boring suburban houses. When the fund pays out its first dividend next month, Kendrick will come crawling back to me." I looked at Derek, who was suddenly sweating profusely under the collar of his expensive suit. He knew there was no dividend, he knew there was no fund, but he could not say that in front of his biggest marks. "You really should just take the $50,000 and leave," Natalie Sienna chimed in, taking a large gulp of her red wine. "You are embarrassing yourself standing here trying to act like you belong in this tax bracket." Before I could even respond, Sienna intentionally stumbled forward. She thrust her wineglass toward me, sending a splash of dark red vintage wine directly onto the skirt of my crimson dress. The liquid left a dark spreading stain on the expensive silk. "Oh my goodness!" Sienna gasped, covering her mouth in a terrible display of fake shock. "My hand just slipped. I am so sorry, Natalie. I guess you cannot return that dress now." Derek let out a sharp bark of laughter, and Patricia shook her head in sheer disgust. "Look at you," Patricia said, pointing at the stain. "You are a mess. Just sign the paper, take the money, and go out the back door before you ruin Derek's big night." I did not scream. I did not cry. I calmly reached over to a passing waiter tray and picked up a crisp white cloth napkin. I dabbed gently at the wine stain on my dress, keeping my movements slow and deliberate. Every second I dragged this out was another second the federal agents outside used to lock down the perimeter of the building. I checked the face of my diamond watch. It was almost time. "I am not going anywhere," I said, dropping the stained napkin onto the nearest table. "I told you I am staying for the pitch." Derek's jaw tightened. He realized he could not physically drag me out without causing a massive scene in front of his wealthy prospective investors. "Fine," he snapped, adjusting his tie. "Stand in the back and keep your mouth shut. Watch how a real business operates." He turned on his heel and marched toward the small stage at the front of the room, where a large projector screen was set up. Sienna, Patricia, and Rachel followed closely behind him like a royal procession, taking their reserved seats in the front row. I stayed near the back, pulling my iPad out of my clutch. I connected it to the restaurant wireless presentation network, bypassing Derek's laptop entirely. The show was about to begin. I stood in the shadows at the back of the room, my iPad securely linked to the restaurant wireless presentation system. I had fully bypassed the connection to Derek's laptop. The digital bridge was established, and all I had to do was press one button to take over the massive projector screen at the front of the room. But I wanted to let him dig his grave just a little bit deeper. Derek walked up to the small stage, adjusting the lapel of his tailored suit. He tapped the microphone, and the room immediately quieted down. The clinking of expensive crystal glasses stopped as all eyes turned to him. He smiled that bright, practiced smile that had completely fooled me a decade ago. It was the smile of a man who believed his own lies so deeply that he could sell ice to a blizzard. "Thank you all for coming tonight." Derek began, his voice echoing through the banquet hall. "We are here to celebrate the launch of the Family Investment Fund. But before we get into the numbers, I want to talk about mindset. I want to talk about what it takes to truly build wealth in today's economy. It requires vision, it requires ruthlessness, and most importantly, it requires cutting ties with anything that holds you back." He clicked a small wireless remote in his hand. The massive screen behind him lit up. Instead of a financial spreadsheet or a business plan, he projected his own social media profile for the entire room to see. He wanted to showcase his newly fabricated lifestyle brand to his prospective investors. A high-definition video began to play. It was the viral clip he had filmed earlier this week. There was Derek leaning aggressively against a brand-new silver Porsche 911. The camera panned over the sleek curves of the sports car, while Derek spoke directly into the lens, bragging about his massive real estate profits. But he did not stop there. The video cut to a graphic he had personally edited. It displayed a highly unflattering photo of me right next to a fake GoFundMe campaign link. "Sometimes you have to leave the past behind." Derek's voice boomed from the speakers as the video played. "My ex-wife Natalie lost her mind and her house in our divorce. She refused to evolve. So I evolved without her. If anyone wants to help a destitute woman get back on her feet, feel free to scan the QR code on the screen." A wave of uncomfortable murmurs rippled through the back of the room, but the front row erupted in applause. My mother, Patricia, was beaming with pride, clapping her hands together as if Derek had just cured a major disease. Rachel was laughing so hard she had to wipe a tear from her eye. Sienna pulled out her phone, and I watched from the back as she live commented on the video projecting onto the screen, adding a string of crying, laughing emojis for everyone to see. He was publicly humiliating me in front of Seattle elite, using my own stolen money to fund the production. The sheer psychological warfare of his presentation was staggering. My phone began to vibrate violently in my clutch. It was not just one message, it was a complete flood. Mutual friends who were sitting in the middle rows of the restaurant were texting me rapidly. Some were expressing shock, while others were asking if I was okay. People who had known me for years were suddenly looking at me with deep, profound pity. They thought I was a broken woman, crashing a party I no longer belonged to. They thought I was standing in the back of the room in a wine-stained dress, watching the man who defeated me gloat about his victory. I ignored the texts from the pitying audience members. I kept my eyes completely locked on my phone screen, waiting for the only message that actually mattered. Then it arrived. An urgent priority email popped into my inbox from Barbara, my managing partner at the forensic accounting firm. The subject line was highlighted in bright red. The email was brief and strictly professional, but it carried the weight of a federal hammer. "The warrants are fully signed by the federal judge," Barbara wrote. "The tactical units are in position outside the restaurant. Execute the data transfer now and come into the office immediately after the takedown is complete. We need to finalize the asset seizure paperwork tonight." I read the words twice, feeling a rush of pure adrenaline replace the icy calm in my veins. The trap was no longer just a concept. It was a legally binding reality, backed by the full force of the United States Department of Justice. I looked up from my phone. Derek was still pacing the stage, soaking in the admiration of the crowd. He was right about one thing. It really did require ruthlessness to build a new life. And I was about to show him exactly what a ruthless woman looked like. I tapped the screen of my iPad, overriding his presentation entirely. The moment my finger tapped the glass screen of my iPad, the massive projector behind Derek flickered. His social media profile and the fake donation link vanished instantly. In their place, a stark black and white legal document appeared stretching 10 feet tall across the wall. It was the deed transfer for the Bellevue house. The room fell into a confused silence. Derek aggressively clicked his wireless remote, trying to regain control of the system, but it was completely locked out. "What is this?" Derek demanded, his voice cracking as he looked back at the screen and then out at the audience. "We are experiencing a slight technical difficulty, ladies and gentlemen." "It is not a technical difficulty, Derek," I said, projecting my voice so it carried clearly to every corner of the banquet hall. I slowly walked down the center aisle of the restaurant, my crimson silk dress swishing around my ankles. "It is the truth. And since you were so eager to share our personal business with your potential investors, I figured we should give them the full financial picture." Patricia stood up from her front row seat, her face turning a deep shade of red. "Natalie, stop this right now," she hissed. "You are embarrassing the family." "I am saving the family," I replied without breaking my stride. I reached the front row and turned to face the room. I pointed to the massive screen behind Derek. "What you are looking at is the deed transfer for my $2 million home." Derek claimed he sold it using spousal rights to fund this new investment firm, but there is a massive problem with that story. I tapped my iPad again. The screen transitioned to a new document. This one had a bold federal seal at the top. "6 months ago, I transferred ownership of that property into a revocable living trust," I announced, watching the faces of the wealthy investors in the crowd shift from confusion to sudden sharp realization. "I am the sole trustee. Derek forged my signature on a void deed. He sold a house he did not own. But it gets better." I tapped the screen one more time. The ownership registry for Apex Holdings, the shell company Derek sold the house to, appeared. He used an online broker who did not check the ultimate beneficial ownership of the buyer. I explained, my voice steady and commanding. "Derek sold my house to a company that I secretly created. He sold my house to me. The money he used to fund this ridiculous family investment fund came from a hard money loan tied to my corporate accounts. Every single dollar sitting in his bank account right now is classified by the federal government as the direct result of wire fraud." The banquet hall erupted into absolute chaos. Several investors immediately stood up, grabbing their coats and heading for the exits. They wanted absolutely nothing to do with a federally tracked fraud case. Derek dropped his microphone. It hit the wooden stage with a loud, screeching feedback noise that made people cover their ears. He scrambled down the steps, his face pale and sweating. "You are lying," he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You are a bitter, crazy woman. I reported you to the state board this morning. I told them you embezzled this money. You are going to lose your CPA license and go to jail." I laughed, a genuine, bright laugh that echoed over the panic in the room. "You really thought a forensic accounting firm would take the word of a man with no broker license over their own senior investigator?" I asked. "My managing partner laughed at your complaint, Derek. In fact, she gave me the firm resources to finish building the federal case against you." Sienna let out a high-pitched shriek as she checked her phone. "The bank accounts," she yelled, her voice trembling. "Derek, all the accounts are frozen. My credit cards just declined." Rachel grabbed Derek by the lapels of his suit, her Rolex flashing under the chandeliers. "What does she mean the money is fake?" Rachel screamed. "Mom gave you $500,000 from her house equity." "Where is our money, Derek?" Patricia sank back into her chair, clutching her chest as the devastating reality finally pierced through her delusion. She had mortgaged her entire life for a man who had stolen from her own daughter. I did not have to answer Rachel. The blaring sound of heavy sirens outside the restaurant answered for me. The heavy mahogany doors at the back of the banquet hall burst open. It was not the local police. It was a team of federal agents wearing dark tactical gear with the letters FBI clearly printed in bright yellow across their backs. They fanned out across the room, instantly securing the exits. Derek spun around looking like a trapped animal. He took one step toward the kitchen doors, but two federal agents were already there, blocking his path. "Nobody move," a senior agent commanded, stepping into the center of the room. "Derek, you are under arrest for aggravated identity theft and federal wire fraud." Derek fell to his knees on the marble floor, the fake confidence completely drained from his body. Sienna backed away from him, holding her Hermes bag like a shield, until an agent firmly took it from her hands, tagging it as federal evidence. I stood perfectly still in my crimson dress, watching the man who tried to destroy me get pulled to his feet and handcuffed. He looked at me, his eyes begging for a mercy he had never once shown me. I just smiled. "I told you, I paid for everything." I just smiled. "I told you, I paid for everything." As I stood there in the suddenly quiet banquet hall, watching the flashing red and blue lights reflect off the floor-to-ceiling windows, my mind drifted back to the moment that guaranteed this exact outcome. It was Tuesday morning, just days before this spectacular collapse. Derek had tried to execute a massive corporate hit job against me, hoping to sever my only remaining lifeline. He truly believed he could take away my forensic accounting license and leave me completely defenseless. When I received the urgent email from Barbara, my managing partner, that Tuesday, I had immediately driven to our downtown Seattle office. The tension in my chest was heavy as I rode the elevator up to the 40th floor. A formal complaint to the state licensing board was the kind of threat that could end a career instantly. I walked into Barbara Corner office and took a seat across from her massive mahogany desk. The room was deathly quiet. Barbara sat there with a thick stack of printed papers resting under her folded hands. Her face was completely unreadable. "Your ex-husband filed a formal grievance with the state board this morning," Barbara said, her voice flat. "He also sent a copy directly to our Human Resources Department. He is claiming that you embezzled funds from his private investment business to purchase your Bellevue property. He stated that you are currently using your senior position at this firm to hide the stolen money and manipulate financial records. He is demanding an immediate suspension of your certified public accountant license, pending a full criminal investigation." I looked at the stack of papers. Derek had fabricated ledgers and drafted desperate accusations, hoping to create enough administrative smoke to get me fired. He wanted me discredited, so I would have zero credibility when I eventually tried to expose his fraud. It was a vicious, calculated move. I took a deep breath, ready to defend myself. I opened my mouth to explain, but before I could speak, Barbara let out a sharp breath. A slow, sharp smile spread across her face, and then she leaned back in her heavy leather chair and burst out laughing. "The absolute arrogance of this man," Barbara said, shaking her head in pure disbelief. "He actually tried to weaponize a forensic accounting firm against its own senior investigator." I let out a breath I did not realize I was holding. "You do not believe him?" I asked. "Natalie, I am the managing partner of a firm that untangles multinational corporate fraud," Barbara said, tossing the complaint casually across the desk. "I know what a fabricated ledger looks like. More importantly, I know you. I already briefed our internal legal team the moment this garbage arrived in my inbox. We are legally protected, and we are obviously ignoring his ridiculous demands. But we are going to do a lot more than just ignore him." Barbara leaned forward, her expression turning fierce and supportive. She typed something into her computer, and a notification popped up on my phone. "I just granted your security credentials full unrestricted access to our proprietary investigative software," Barbara said. "You take whatever firm resources you need. You take the time you need. Finish building your federal case against him. Nail him to the wall, Nat. Do not leave a single stone unturned." "Thank you, Barbara," I said, feeling a surge of genuine gratitude. Having the full weight of a prestigious accounting firm backing me meant Derek was walking into a financial woodchipper. I left her office and marched straight to my desk. I plugged my encrypted hard drive into the secure terminal and launched the firm advanced tracing software. It was time to pull back the curtain on his supposed brilliance. First, I ran a deep forensic trace on Apex Holdings, the Delaware shell company Derek used to illegally purchase my house. It took the software less than 3 minutes to bypass the dummy directors and pull the true ultimate beneficial ownership records. The system confirmed what I had set up 6 months ago. I owned the purchasing entity. Derek had fraudulently sold my house to me using a hard money loan under my own corporate umbrella. Next, I ran a trace on the funds he received from that fraudulent sale. The software mapped out the exact routing numbers. I watched the digital trail as Derek moved the stolen money into a centralized account. Then I saw a massive incoming wire transfer hit his ledger. $500,000. The origin point was a local credit union. It was the home equity line of credit my mother, Patricia, had foolishly taken out on her retirement home. I watched the money merge with the illicit real estate funds, instantly tainting my mother life savings with federal wire fraud. Derek was not a financial genius. He was just a reckless thief, leaving a neon digital trail. I compiled the data into an ironclad dossier, saving every routing number, every timestamp, and every forged signature. I sent the completed package directly to Agent Miller at the Federal Bureau. The corporate hit job Derek thought would end my career had actually given me the exact tools I needed to end his freedom. With the digital forensics fully secured, I locked my workstation and took the private elevator down to the 12th floor of our building. This was where the high-stakes corporate attorneys operated. I walked past the glass conference rooms and stepped directly into the corner office of my personal attorney, Jonathan. He was a ruthless legal strategist who had been helping me quietly dismantle Derek long before the lockout ever happened. Jonathan looked up from a thick stack of documents on his massive mahogany desk and smiled warmly. He gestured for me to sit in the plush leather chair opposite him. I dropped my briefcase on the floor and let out a long, heavy breath, letting the tension of the morning finally leave my shoulders. I just sent the final financial dossier to the federal agents, I told him, leaning back in the chair. Derek tried to file a grievance with my state licensing board this morning to get me fired. It backfired spectacularly. My managing partner laughed in his face, essentially, and gave me unrestricted access to our software to finish tracking his wire fraud. Jonathan chuckled and shook his head in sheer disbelief. Derek really has no idea who he is dealing with, he said, picking up a specific piece of paper from his desk. He handed it to me across the table. Speaking of spectacular backfires, take a look at this. It is the official county record of the deed transfer for your Bellevue house. I took the paper and scanned the printed text. There was my forged signature sitting right next to Derek's sloppy handwriting. It looked official to the untrained eye. It had a fake notary stamp and a fabricated spousal consent waiver attached to it. Derek genuinely believed this single piece of paper made him a victorious real estate mogul who had successfully conquered his ex-wife. He thinks he is so clever, I said, tracing the forged signature with my index finger. He thinks he legally sold my property out from under me and left me with absolutely nothing. Jonathan leaned forward, resting his elbows on the polished wood desk. He thinks he sold the property because he is an arrogant fool who relies on quick online legal forms instead of doing actual deep due diligence. He did not bother to pull the comprehensive property records. If he had, he would have realized that you have not personally owned that house for over 6 months. This was the absolute core of my entire strategy and the ultimate reason I had not panicked. When Derek and Sienna locked me out on the porch in the pouring rain, I did not scream or cry, because I knew a massive secret. 6 months ago, when I first discovered Derek's secret credit cards and unexplained cash withdrawals, I did not confront him. I knew a narcissist would simply lie, deflect, and try to hide his assets quickly. Instead, I took immediate silent action to protect my most valuable asset. Working quietly with Jonathan, I legally transferred the $2 million Bellevue house into a revocable living trust. I named myself as the sole trustee and the sole beneficiary of that trust. In the eyes of the law, the house was no longer owned by an individual named Natalie. It was owned by the trust, which operated as a completely separate legal entity, shielding it from any marital claims. Derek forged signature on this residential deed transfer is completely void, Jonathan explained, his voice laced with intense professional satisfaction. He could not legally sell an asset owned by a trust that he has absolutely no legal access to. He claimed spousal rights under community property laws, but the trust completely supersedes those fraudulent claims because you purchased the home before the marriage and funded the trust with separate property. So the title company just pushed it through based on his fraudulent notary stamp. I asked, wanting to clarify the exact legal failure point. Exactly, Jonathan nodded, leaning back. Title companies process thousands of these quick cash transactions every single month. Derek used a shady online discount broker who constantly cuts corners to save money. They relied entirely on his fraudulent spousal consent forms and pushed the paperwork through without verifying the ultimate beneficial owner of the property. The sale is legally a ghost. It does not exist in any enforceable capacity whatsoever. I looked down at the forged deed, feeling a profound sense of vindication wash over me. Derek thought he had trapped me in a corner, with no money and no shelter. But by forging my name on a document attempting to sell a trust asset, he had committed massive federal forgery. "We have him," Jonathan said quietly but firmly. "The house is perfectly safe. It remains fully protected within your trust. Whenever you are ready, we can file the injunction to reverse the title registry. But right now, letting him believe he succeeded is your absolute biggest advantage." I handed the void deed back to Jonathan, smiling coldly. "Let him keep believing it," I said. "Let him spend the money he thinks he made. The more he spends, the heavier his federal sentence will be." I stood up, picking up my briefcase. I had one more vital piece of the puzzle to review today, and it was the most deeply satisfying piece of all. I sat back down in the plush leather chair and reached into my briefcase one more time. I pulled out a thick blue folder securely bound with a thick rubber band and slid it across the polished mahogany desk toward Jonathan. He raised an eyebrow and picked it up carefully, removing the band. He opened the cover and began scanning the top document. "Have you tracked the limited liability company that actually bought the house?" Jonathan asked, his eyes darting across the printed text. "Apex Holdings is listed as the buyer of record on Derek fraudulent deed. Have we identified who these people are and where their funding originated?" I could not help but smirk as I watched him read. "I do not need to track them, Jonathan," I replied, my voice completely steady. "I created the company." Jonathan froze his pen, hovering just an inch above his legal pad. He slowly looked up at me, the silence in his corner office suddenly feeling incredibly heavy. He stared at me for a long moment before setting the pen down. "Are you telling me you are the ghost buyer?" he asked, his voice dropping to a near whisper in sheer professional shock. 6 months ago, when I first uncovered Derek's secret credit cards and his desperate need for liquid cash, I knew exactly what his next move would be, I explained, leaning forward. A man like him, backed into a financial corner, always tries to liquidate the biggest asset he can find. He wanted to sell the house quickly and quietly without my knowledge. To do that, he needed a cash buyer who would not ask any difficult questions. So, I simply became that buyer. I pointed to the second page in the blue folder. I registered Apex Holdings as a blind shell company in Delaware, where corporate privacy laws are incredibly strict. Then I secured a commercial hard money loan under my own corporate umbrella, fully insured and backed by my existing investment portfolio. The shady online real estate broker Derek hired to push the sale through just saw a registered Delaware corporation with verified liquid funds ready to close in cash. They never bothered to trace the ultimate beneficial owner of Apex Holdings. If they had done even a basic background check, they would have seen my name sitting right at the very top of the corporate registry. Jonathan started laughing, a deep, resonant laugh that echoed off the glass walls of his office. He shook his head, leaning back in his heavy chair. "You let him steal his own trap," he said, clapping his hands together once. "This is absolute brilliance, Natalie. You bought your own house. Derek unwittingly sold my house to me." I confirmed, feeling a deep wave of satisfaction. But the money he received from Apex Holdings, the money currently sitting in his personal checking account, was absolutely real. By executing the sale with a forged signature and having those commercial loan funds wired across state lines into his personal account, he committed a textbook federal crime. Every single dollar he received is now classified as the direct proceeds of federal wire fraud. Jonathan said, his legal mind immediately calculating the massive criminal implications. Under federal law, anyone who touches that money is receiving stolen property. "Exactly," I said, tapping the polished wood desk. "The $200,000 he gave my sister Rachel, the Rolex she was wearing yesterday, the vintage champagne they were drinking, the designer clothes Sienna is parading around in. Every single item was purchased with federally tracked illicit funds." Jonathan flipped through the rest of the file, looking at the bank routing numbers and the federal tracking codes my accounting software had generated. "He has absolutely no idea," he said, marveling at the sheer scale of the financial web I had woven. "He thinks he outsmarted a forensic accountant, and instead he essentially walked directly into a federal penitentiary and locked the cell door behind himself. He thinks he is a millionaire," I corrected him, my tone turning icy. "He thinks he won the divorce and secured his future. And because he is a narcissist who desperately needs constant validation, he is not just going to sit quietly on that money. He is going to spend it as loudly and as visibly as humanly possible to prove to the world how successful he is." I stood up and smoothed out my skirt. "And the most beautiful part of this entire operation is that the more money he spends, the longer his prison sentence will be." Jonathan stood up and shook my hand, a look of profound respect on his face. "Let me know when you want to drop the hammer," he said. "I will," I promised, walking out of his office. As I rode the elevator down to the lobby, my phone buzzed in my purse. It was a notification from a luxury car dealership in downtown Seattle. Derek had just swiped his debit card for a massive down payment. He was spending the federally tracked money right at this exact second, completely unaware that every dollar was a nail in his coffin. I stared at the notification from the luxury car dealership on my phone screen. $75,000. That was the exact amount Derek had just transferred to secure his new vehicle. He was using a debit card linked directly to the account holding the federal wire fraud funds. Every time he swiped that piece of plastic, he was essentially signing another confession document for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I slid my phone back into my purse and walked out into the crisp Seattle afternoon air, feeling a profound sense of control. Before I could even reach my car, my phone buzzed again. I pulled it out, expecting another automated alert from the bank tracing software. Instead, the screen lit up with a direct message from my mother, Patricia. I opened the text thread and felt a cold knot form in my stomach. It was a high-resolution photograph of a legal document. I zoomed in on the image, reading the bold print at the top of the page. It was a finalized second mortgage agreement. My mother had fully owned her 4-bedroom retirement home in the suburbs for over 10 years. My late father had worked tirelessly his entire life, doing double shifts at the manufacturing plant to pay off that mortgage before he passed away. He wanted to ensure she would always have a safe place to live without the stress of monthly payments. Now, looking at the document on my screen, I saw that she had completely reversed all of his hard work in a single afternoon. She had pulled $500,000 in equity from the property. Below the image was a text message typed out with aggressive confidence. "This is what family loyalty looks like, Natalie. I just wired $500,000 to Derek for the family investment fund. He promised me a 40% return by the end of the month. I'm going to be a millionaire while you sit alone in a hotel room counting pennies. You could have had this life if you just supported your husband. Learn from Sienna. She knows how to treat a real man." I stared at the glowing screen, reading her toxic words over and over again. I could easily picture the scene at her house. Rachel was probably sitting right next to her on the couch, hyping her up, convincing her that Derek was a financial genius. They fed off each other greed, constantly validating their worst decisions. A younger version of me, the daughter who desperately craved her mother approval, would have called her immediately. I would have begged her to cancel the wire transfer. I would have sent her the federal tracing documents to prove Derek was a complete fraud. I would have tried to save her from her own blinding greed and delusion. But that version of me died the night I was locked out of my own home in the rain, while she drank my champagne and laughed at my pain. I did not type out a warning. I did not try to explain the severe legal ramifications of moving money into an account currently being monitored by the Internal Revenue Service. I simply opened the emoji keyboard, selected the yellow thumbs up icon, and hit send. A single thumbs up emoji. It was the absolute least amount of energy I could possibly expend. Let them dig their own graves, I whispered to myself, sitting behind the steering wheel of my car. My mother had made her choice. She had looked at a man who was openly cheating on her daughter, a man who was trying to leave me financially ruined, and she had decided he was the hero of the story. She wanted to be a millionaire by associating with a flashy con artist instead of respecting the daughter who had quietly paid her bills for years. I knew exactly where that $500,000 was going. It was flying straight into the digital trap I had built. By the end of the business day, that money would be frozen solid by the federal government, marked as illicit proceeds connected to a major financial crime. My mother thought she was buying a ticket to absolute luxury, but she was actually signing the deed to her house over to a bank that would inevitably foreclose on her when Derek Fake Fund spectacularly collapsed. She was destroying her own sanctuary just to spite me. As I started my car, the bank tracing app on my phone chimed again. Derek was not just buying cars, he was taking Sienna on a massive shopping spree downtown. The alerts showed thousands of dollars being dropped at high-end designer boutiques. He was moving fast, trying to convert the stolen cash into physical assets before the divorce proceedings caught up with him. What he did not realize was that physical assets bought with stolen money are the easiest things for federal agents to seize under asset forfeiture laws. They were parading around the city wearing federal evidence and proudly posting about it on social media. The countdown to their absolute destruction was moving faster than I ever anticipated. I had barely pulled into the parking garage of my hotel when my phone rang again. It was Kendrick. The moment I answered, I could hear the sound of a car engine roaring in the background and the faint hum of tires on the highway. He was driving. "I am done, Natalie," Kendrick said, his voice shaking with a level of rage I had never heard from him before. "I am completely done with your family." "What happened?" I asked, pulling into a parking space and cutting the engine. "I came home early from a commercial appraisal across town." Kendrick explained, his breathing heavy over the speakerphone. "As an appraiser, I know the strict legal boundaries of real estate transactions. It is my entire livelihood." I walked into the kitchen and found Rachel sitting at the marble island. She had a stack of banking documents spread out in front of her. She was holding a blue pen and meticulously tracing over a copy of my signature from an old joint tax return. A cold chill ran down my spine. I knew Rachel was greedy, but I had no idea she was reckless enough to attempt actual financial fraud. "What was she trying to sign?" I asked. "A home equity loan application," Kendrick practically shouted, making the phone speaker crackle. "She was trying to take out a second mortgage on our house. She wanted to pull $300,000 of our equity to give to Derek for his fake crypto fund. She was willing to risk the roof over our son just to impress a con artist. When I confronted her, she did not even have the decency to look ashamed. She doubled down, Natalie. She screamed right in my face." I closed my eyes, picturing my sister toxic entitlement. Rachel had always been a master of playing the victim while actively destroying the people around her. "What did she say to you?" "She called me a coward," Kendrick said, his voice dropping to a bitter low register. "She told me I was a foolish black man who did not understand how to hustle. She said Derek was a financial genius making real moves, while I was just a glorified house inspector holding her back from her true potential. She told me she deserved to be rich and I was standing in her way. She literally said I was suffocating her financial dreams. I gripped the steering wheel tight. The audacity of her words was sickening. "What did you do, Kendrick?" I did not yell. Kendrick replied, sounding eerily calm now. I did not argue with her delusion. I just walked upstairs, grabbed 2 large suitcases, and packed everything my son and I needed. I took his favorite toys, his school clothes, and all my important financial documents. When I came back downstairs, Rachel was still sitting there glaring at me. She told me I would be crawling back when she was a millionaire. I looked her dead in the eye and told her she was not hustling toward wealth. I told her she was hustling toward a federal prison sentence. "Where are you right now?" I asked, making sure he was safe. "I am driving to my sister house in Tacoma," Kendrick said. "My son is asleep in the back seat. I already called my lawyer. I am filing for divorce first thing tomorrow morning, and I am seeking full primary custody. I am not letting my boy grow up around a woman who thinks stealing from her own husband is a viable career path. They have all lost their minds, Natalie. Every single one of them is completely infected by Derek lies." "You are making the right choice, Kendrick," I told him, my voice firm and supportive. "You are protecting your son, and you are protecting yourself." Rachel made her decision when she picked up that pen. "You owe her nothing." "Is Derek actually going to get away with this?" Kendrick asked, his tone shifting from anger to deep exhaustion. "Is he really going to walk away with your house and your mother retirement savings while Rachel gets to pretend she is a victim?" I smiled in the quiet darkness of my car. I remembered the thick gold leaf invitation sitting on the desk in my hotel room. No, Kendrick, he is not going to get away with anything. In fact, his grand finale is already perfectly scheduled. "What do you mean?" Kendrick asked. "Derek and Rachel are hosting a massive launch dinner for the family investment fund this Friday night," I explained. "They rented out the private banquet room at Belmont's downtown. They invited half the city to pitch their fake crypto portfolio. It is supposed to be Derek Big Victory Lap." "You are not going to that dinner, are you?" Kendrick asked, sounding genuinely concerned for my safety. "They will just humiliate you, Natalie." "I am absolutely going," I said, "and you need to be there too. Why would I ever want to see any of them again?" He sighed. "Because Friday night is when the federal agents execute the arrest warrants," I said, letting the truth finally drop. "I have been working with the Bureau for 6 months. Derek sold my house to a shell company I own. Every dollar he has is wire fraud. It is going to be a spectacular show, Kendrick. I suggest you wear a nice suit and get a seat near the back. You are going to want to watch the fireworks." Kendrick was silent for a long moment. Then a low, deep chuckle echoed over the phone line. "I will be there, Natalie. I would not miss it for the world." I hung up the phone with Kendrick, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. The pieces of the board were not just falling into place, they were locking together with irreversible force. I placed my phone on the sleek marble counter of my new kitchen. Earlier that morning, I had checked out of the Fairmont Hotel and signed a short-term lease on a stunning corporate penthouse in downtown Seattle. The space was entirely paid for through my firm's secure relocation fund. It had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Puget Sound, and the kind of quiet, secure luxury that Derek could never genuinely afford. I was in the middle of unpacking my neatly folded clothes when the intercom on the wall buzzed. It was the building concierge speaking in a hushed, professional tone. He informed me that a very agitated young woman was in the lobby, demanding to speak with the property manager. She was claiming that I was a criminal using stolen funds to rent the penthouse, and she insisted they evict me immediately. "Send her up to my floor," I told the concierge, keeping my voice perfectly calm. "I will handle her myself." Less than 2 minutes later, the private elevator doors opened directly into my foyer. Sienna stepped out, looking completely breathless and radiating a frantic, toxic energy. She was dressed head to toe in brand new designer clothing. Everything she wore was plastered with massive logos screaming for attention. It was the exact wardrobe of someone who had never possessed real money and wanted to make absolutely sure everyone knew she had it now. "You are psychotic, Natalie." Sienna practically yelled, stepping onto the hardwood floor and pointing a manicured finger at me. You are actually psychotic. You told Kendrick to leave Rachel just to ruin our family dynamic. You are trying to sabotage Derek's big launch dinner because you are jealous. I stood leaning against the kitchen island, crossing my arms. I did not invite you into my home, Sienna. You have about 60 seconds to explain why you are harassing the concierge before I call building security to have you physically removed. Sienna scoffed, tossing her hair over her shoulder. She reached into her oversized designer coat and pulled out a manila envelope. She slapped it aggressively onto my marble counter. I am not the one who is going to be removed, she sneered with absolute venom. That is a formal cease and desist order, mixed with a notice of fraudulent tenancy. Derek had his legal team draft it this morning. We know you do not have any real money left, Natalie. You maxed out your credit cards and now you are probably squatting in this penthouse using fake corporate credentials. Derek is notifying the building management that you are a financial liability. If you do not stop contacting our family, and if you show your face at the dinner on Friday, we are suing you for harassment and emotional distress. I looked down at the envelope, but I did not touch it. I did not need to open it to know it was completely fabricated nonsense. Derek did not have a real legal team. He had internet templates and an inflated ego. Instead of arguing about the fake eviction threat, my eyes drifted to the crook of Sienna's arm. Hanging there was a brand new Hermes Birkin bag. It was not the standard leather model I had seen women carrying downtown. This was a Niloticus crocodile Birkin in a deep emerald green. It was a staggering piece of craftsmanship that easily retailed for over $40,000 on the secondary market. Derek had truly drained my mother home equity to buy his mistress the ultimate status symbol. That is a very striking bag, Sienna, I said, completely ignoring her legal threats. The shift in my tone caught her off guard. She blinked, her angry expression faltering for a second before a smug, triumphant smile took over her face. She lifted her arm, proudly displaying the emerald green crocodile skin. Yes, it is, she said, her voice dripping with extreme arrogance. Derek bought it for me yesterday during our shopping trip. He told me I deserve to carry something that matches my worth. It cost more than your car, Natalie. It is beautiful, I admitted, stepping closer to get a better look. The craftsmanship on the hardware is incredible. Hermes Blind stamps their serial numbers under the right strap on these specific exotic models, right? Sienna puffed out her chest, eager to prove her luxury knowledge. Exactly. The sales associate showed it to me. She unhooked the front clasp and tilted the bag toward me, pulling back the right leather strap to reveal the tiny alphanumeric code stamped directly into the green leather. See? Completely authentic. I stared at the code, letting my photographic memory lock the letters and numbers into my brain. A G4729K. I smiled warmly at her. Thank you for showing me that, I said, stepping back. It really is a masterpiece. Sienna looked confused for a fraction of a second, wondering why I was not crying out of jealousy. Then she remembered her original mission and pointed at the manila envelope again. Just read the letter, Natalie. Stop trying to ruin Derek's life. He won. You lost. Accept it and move on before things get worse for you. I picked up the manila envelope and handed it right back to her. I do not need to read it, Sienna, but I do suggest you keep a very close eye on that bag. It would be a terrible shame if you lost it. She snatched the envelope from my hand, rolling her eyes. You are pathetic, she muttered, turning around and marching back into the private elevator. The doors slid shut, leaving me alone in the quiet luxury of my penthouse. The moment she was gone, I walked over to my laptop and opened the encrypted communication portal with the Federal Bureau. I typed a quick message to Agent Miller. The suspect used the illicit funds to purchase a Niloticus crocodile Hermes Birkin. The blind stamp serial number is AG4729K. Please add this specific item to the Federal Asset Forfeiture Seizure list for Friday night. I hit send, feeling a deep wave of satisfaction. Sienna thought she was carrying a status symbol, but she was actually carrying a homing beacon for a federal indictment. I closed my laptop and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse looking out over the Seattle skyline. Sienna and her stolen Hermes bag were just a small piece of the puzzle. The real target was the entire fraudulent empire Derek was trying to build using my assets. I needed him to feel completely invincible right up until the final second. The next morning, I was sitting at my kitchen island, reviewing the latest federal asset forfeiture logs, when the secure intercom chimed. The concierge informed me that a specialized courier had just dropped off a priority package for me. I asked him to send it up. A few minutes later, I was holding a thick, heavy envelope made of expensive matte black cardstock. It was sealed with a ridiculous gold wax stamp bearing the letters FIF. I broke the wax seal and pulled out the invitation. The edges were lined with real gold leaf. The heavy cursive font practically screamed of newly stolen wealth. You are cordially invited to the inaugural launch and private investor dinner for the Family Investment Fund. The venue was Belmont's, which was widely known as one of the most exclusive and expensive five-star restaurants on the downtown waterfront. I scanned the bottom of the invitation. Derek had listed himself as the chief executive officer and senior managing partner. Right below his name, he had listed my sister Rachel as the vice president of investor relations. They were not just playing with my mother retirement money anymore. By hosting a formal dinner to pitch to local business owners and extended family members, they were actively attempting to solicit millions of dollars across state lines. They were escalating their own federal crimes in real time and putting their entire scheme on public display. As I stared at the gold foil lettering, my phone vibrated against the marble counter. It was a text message from my mother, Patricia. I opened the message thread fully expecting another photo of a luxury purchase or a mocking comment about my hotel room. The message read, "I made sure Derek sent you an invitation. You need to come to this dinner on Friday night. Put on a nice outfit and come apologize to him in front of everyone. If you show some genuine humility and admit you were wrong about him, he might be willing to hire you as his secretary. It is your absolute last chance to be a part of this family and secure your financial future. Do not ruin this, Natalie." I read the words twice, feeling a cold, hard knot form in the center of my chest. My own mother was telling a 34-year-old senior forensic accountant to beg a criminal for a minimum-wage clerical job. She wanted me to bow down to the man who was actively draining her own home equity. It was a masterclass in psychological abuse and toxic family dynamics. I did not reply to her text. I simply took a screenshot of the message and uploaded it to my encrypted federal evidence folder. I was going to attend that dinner, but I was certainly not going to apologize, and I was definitely not going to wear a simple outfit to blend into the background. If I was going to walk directly into a room filled with people who wanted to see me broken, I needed to look completely untouchable. I needed armor. I grabbed my purse and took the elevator down to the street level. The air was crisp and cold as I walked toward the high-end luxury shopping district in downtown Seattle. I bypassed the department stores and walked directly into an exclusive designer boutique that required a private appointment just to enter. I flashed my corporate platinum card to the security guard and was immediately escorted to a private fitting room. A senior stylist brought me several options, but I rejected all the muted colors and conservative cuts. I wanted something that commanded absolute attention. Then she brought out a floor-length crimson silk gown. It had a sharp, elegant neckline and a sweeping skirt that moved like liquid fire. It was aggressive, confident, and completely unapologetic. I tried it on and looked at myself in the floor-to-ceiling mirror. The woman looking back at me did not look like a victim who had just been locked out of her home. She looked like an executioner. "I will take it," I told the stylist. She smiled, looking at the price tag. "It is $3,000, miss." I handed her my credit card. "That is perfectly fine," I said. While she processed the payment, I pulled out my phone and dialed Agent Miller. He answered on the first ring. "They are hosting a formal pitch dinner at Belmont's restaurant this Friday night," I told him, keeping my voice low. They are bringing in outside investors to solicit more funds. Agent Miller was quiet for a second as he typed the information into his secure terminal. Belmont's has a private banquet hall in the back, he said. It has only 2 exits. It is a perfect containment zone. We will have tactical units stationed at both doors and plainclothes agents inside the restaurant. Are you going to be inside the room when we move in? I took my receipt from the stylist and picked up the heavy garment bag containing my crimson dress. Yes, I am, I told Agent Miller. I am going to be standing right in the front row. Friday evening arrived with a cold rain washing over the Seattle waterfront. I pulled my car up to the valet stand outside Belmont's. The restaurant was glowing with warm golden light against the dark sky. I handed the attendant my keys and took a deep breath. This was it, the climax of a 6-month operation. I walked through the main dining room and approached the heavy mahogany doors leading to the private banquet hall. 2 hosts stood outside, checking names on an ornate guest list. I gave them my name. One of them looked surprised, but found it on the list and pulled the heavy door open for me. The noise inside the banquet hall was deafening. There were at least 80 people packed into the luxurious space. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over white linen tables and massive floral centerpieces. I saw extended family members I had not spoken to in years, mingled with local business owners in expensive suits. Waiters carrying silver trays of champagne wove through the thick crowd. Derek had clearly spared no expense using my stolen money to create an absolute illusion of success. He was standing near the front of the room holding a glass of scotch and laughing loudly at a joke someone had just made. I stepped fully into the room and let the heavy doors close behind me. The crimson silk gown moved beautifully as I walked forward. The first person to notice me was my Aunt Diane. She was mid-sentence when her jaw physically dropped. She nudged her husband and pointed. Within 10 seconds, the ripple effect took hold. The loud, arrogant laughter died down. The clinking of glasses faded into silence. The room went completely quiet as 80 pairs of eyes turned to look at the woman they had been explicitly told was bankrupt and mentally unstable. I did not look down. I kept my chin high and my shoulders back. I looked like $1 million. The narrative Derek had spent weeks building was instantly shattered into 1,000 pieces. He had told all of our mutual friends and extended family that I was destitute, living out of my car and crying over our divorce. But the woman walking across the polished hardwood floor was radiant confident and wearing a dress that cost more than their monthly mortgage payments. Derek finally turned around, the color completely drained from his face. The smug, arrogant smile he had been wearing vanished instantly, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated panic. He knew he had sent the invitation as a cruel joke to humiliate me. He never actually expected me to show up, and he certainly never expected me to look like I owned the entire building. Sienna was standing right next to him. She was wearing a tight black cocktail dress that suddenly looked incredibly cheap next to my custom silk gown. Her eyes widened in shock before narrowing into a glare of pure venomous jealousy. She immediately grabbed Derek's arm, clutching it so tightly her knuckles turned white. She leaned into him, whispering something frantic and angry. Rachel was standing near the massive ice sculpture with our mother, Patricia. Rachel had a glass of champagne in one hand and was showing off her stolen Rolex to an older cousin. When she saw me, her face twisted into a mask of pure resentment. She could not stand the fact that the attention was no longer entirely on her. I walked past a group of relatives, and Rachel intentionally raised her voice so everyone around her could clearly hear her toxic words. She must have rented that dress, Rachel said, her voice cutting sharply through the quiet room. There is no way she can afford real silk right now. She probably maxed out a new credit card just to come here and beg Derek for a handout. Patricia nodded aggressively in agreement, sipping her champagne. Let her embarrass herself, Patricia said, loud enough for me to catch. She will be crying by the end of the night once she realizes she has nothing left. I did not engage with their petty, pathetic comments. I simply offered Rachel a bright, genuine smile that made her scowl even harder. I continued walking toward the front of the room, scanning the crowd. Near the back, sitting quietly at a small corner table, I saw Kendrick. He was wearing a sharp charcoal suit and nursing a glass of sparkling water. As an African American man who actually understood hard work and legal boundaries, he was completely separated from the rest of my toxic family. When our eyes met, he gave me a slow, respectful nod. He was ready for the show. The silence in the room was finally broken by the soft murmurs of confused guests trying to figure out what was happening. Derek realized he was losing control of his own event. He quickly set his scotch glass down on a nearby table and marched directly toward me. He wanted to intercept me before I could start talking to the prospective investors. His chest was puffed out, but I could see the sweat forming on his forehead. He was terrified. Derek grabbed my elbow, his grip tight and uncomfortable as he forcefully steered me away from the center of the room. He pushed me into a quiet corner near the private mahogany bar, shielding us from the view of the wealthiest investors. "What do you think you're doing here?" He hissed, his voice barely above a whisper but laced with pure venom. "I came for the dinner, Derek," I replied calmly, pulling my arm out of his grasp. I smoothed the crimson silk of my dress. "My mother said you might need a secretary. I figured I would come see what the family investment fund is all about." Derek did not find it funny. He glanced over his shoulder, scanning the room to make sure none of his wealthy marks were watching us. He was breathing heavily, and the vein in his neck was pulsing. "You are out of your mind if you think you are staying," he muttered, stepping closer to block my path. "I am launching a multi-million-dollar enterprise tonight. I do not need my bitter ex-wife ruining the vibe." He reached into his tailored suit jacket and pulled out a folded document. He shoved it into my hands with aggressive force. "Let us handle this like adults, Natalie," he said. I slowly unfolded the thick paper. It was a legal waiver. Specifically, it was a post-divorce settlement agreement. I scanned the text, reading the dense legal jargon. It explicitly stated that by signing I was renouncing any and all claims to his new business ventures, the profits from the Bellevue house sale, and any future assets he acquired. "Sign this right now!" Derek demanded, his eyes darting around the room again. "If you sign it right here, right now, I will wire $50,000 into your account by Monday morning. I will give you the cash to start over somewhere else." "Do not be stupid, Natalie. You have absolutely nothing left. Take the lifeline and walk away." I looked at the document, and then I looked at him. $50,000, I repeated, keeping my voice perfectly level. "You illegally sold my $2 million home, and you are offering me $50,000 to walk away quietly. You are lucky I am offering you anything." He sneered, his upper lip curling in disgust. "I am the one who built the wealth in our marriage. I am the one making real moves in the market. You are just a bitter accountant who could not keep her husband happy. Now sign the paper and get out of my restaurant before I call security to drag you out." This was his classic tactic. For our entire marriage, he had used this exact brand of psychological warfare to make me feel small. Whenever he made a mistake or spent money recklessly, he would flip the script and attack my character. He wanted me to feel so insecure and worthless that I would blindly accept whatever scraps he threw my way. But that manipulation tactic only worked when I actually loved him. Looking at him now, I felt absolutely nothing but clinical detachment. I was studying him the same way I studied a fraudulent corporate ledger. I did not need my law degree or my forensic accounting background to see how incredibly flawed this piece of paper was. The language was desperate and sloppy. It was clearly downloaded from some cheap online legal template and hastily filled out by someone who did not understand federal property laws. He was trying to plug a massive federal leak with a piece of useless paper. I looked from the flawed document to his face. The contrast between his arrogant words and his terrified eyes was staggering. He needed my signature to validate his entire stolen existence. If I signed it, he genuinely believed he would be safe. He thought a simple signature would magically legalize his massive wire fraud and erase the trail of stolen money. He needed me to submit to make his illusion real. Let me think about it, I said, folding the paper neatly and slipping it into my designer clutch. Derek panicked. He reached out as if to grab my purse, but stopped himself when a waiter walked past carrying a tray of appetizers. No, you do not get to think about it, he hissed, leaning in close. The smell of his expensive cologne completely failed to mask the sour smell of his nervous sweat. You sign it right now. Or what, Derek, I asked, tilting my head and offering him a chilling smile. You will cause a massive scene in front of the local business owners you are trying to scam. You will have your hired security drag out your ex-wife, who is currently wearing a $3,000 dress, and chatting pleasantly with your prospective investors. I do not think that will inspire much confidence in your new fund. He breathed heavily, his nostrils flaring. He knew I had him completely trapped in a social hostage situation. He could not risk a public meltdown right before his big presentation. He needed these people to write checks tonight, and any sign of domestic instability would send them running for the door. You think you are so smart, Natalie? He whispered, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. But you are playing a game you do not understand. I have power now. I have capital. These people respect me. You are just a sad footnote in my success story. Do not push me. I smiled, brushing a piece of invisible lint off his expensive lapel. We will see about that, Derek. We will see exactly who understands this game. He looked like he wanted to hit me. His fists were clenched at his sides and his jaw was locked tight. But before he could issue another empty threat, I saw movement over his shoulder. Sienna and Patricia had noticed us standing by the bar, and they were marching over like two loyal guard dogs ready to attack. Patricia reached us first, her heels clicking sharply against the polished hardwood floor. She positioned herself right next to Derek, crossing her arms and glaring at me with a look of absolute disgust. She looked me up and down, taking in the expensive fabric of my gown, but her expression only hardened. She had always hated when I outshined Rachel, and seeing me look this powerful next to the man who was supposedly destroying my life deeply offended her toxic sensibilities. What exactly is the problem here? Patricia demanded, her voice tight with suppressed anger. Derek is trying to host the most important night of his professional career, and you are cornering him by the bar like some desperate beggar. I told you to come here and apologize, Natalie. I did not tell you to harass him. I am not harassing anyone, Mother, I replied, keeping my tone dangerously calm. Derek is the one who dragged me into this corner to offer me a pathetic bribe. Derek scoffed, immediately playing the victim for his captive audience. I was trying to throw her a lifeline, Patricia. I offered her $50,000 just to sign the post-divorce waiver and go away peacefully, but she is being completely unreasonable as usual. Sienna stepped up beside Patricia. She was holding a large crystal glass filled to the brim with a dark, heavy red wine. She swayed slightly on her feet, the cheap fabric of her black cocktail dress bunching around her waist. She looked at me with a mixture of intense insecurity and malicious triumph. You really should just sign the paper, Natalie. Sienna slurred slightly, taking a step closer. You are completely embarrassing yourself standing here trying to act like you belong in this tax bracket. You do not have anything left. Derek took it all. Before I could even respond to her ridiculous taunt, Sienna intentionally shifted her weight. She let out a highly exaggerated gasp, pretending her ankle had suddenly given out in her high heels. She stumbled forward and thrust her wineglass directly toward me. The dark red liquid flew through the air in a heavy arc. I tried to step back, but the space was too tight. The wine hit the lower half of my crimson silk dress, splashing violently against the delicate fabric. The cold liquid soaked through instantly, leaving a massive dark stain that spread rapidly across the pristine material. Some of the wine splattered onto my matching designer heels. A few guests standing near the bar turned around at the commotion, but Derek quickly waved them off, flashing a fake reassuring smile to pretend it was just a clumsy accident. Oops. Sienna giggled, covering her mouth with her free hand in a terrible display of fake shock. My hand just slipped. I am so sorry, Natalie. I guess you cannot return that dress now. She looked at Derek and smiled a nasty, triumphant smirk that proved the entire move was completely calculated. She wanted to physically ruin my armor. She wanted me to look as broken and messy on the outside as they desperately hoped I felt on the inside. I looked at my mother expecting at least a shred of common decency or a reprimand for the woman who had just assaulted her daughter. Instead, Patricia just shook her head in sheer disgust. "Look at you," Patricia said, pointing a manicured finger at the spreading wine stain. "You are a complete mess, Natalie. You look ridiculous. Just sign the paper, take the money, and go out the back door before you ruin Derek's big night any further." They all stood there waiting for the inevitable breakdown. They expected me to burst into tears. They expected me to scream at Sienna or throw a drink back in her face, causing a massive scene that would allow them to call security and have me dragged out in absolute disgrace. They wanted the satisfaction of breaking me. I did not give them a single ounce of satisfaction. I calmly reached over to the edge of the mahogany bar and picked up a crisp white cloth cocktail napkin. I did not break eye contact with Sienna as I slowly bent down and dabbed gently at the wine stain on my dress. The crimson silk was permanently ruined, but it did not matter. The dress had already served its primary purpose. It had gotten me through the door and it had shattered their narrative. I dropped the stained napkin onto the bar counter. I straightened my posture and pulled back the sleeve of my dress. I checked the face of my diamond-studded watch, a piece of jewelry I had purchased with my own hard-earned corporate bonuses. The intricate hands indicated that it was almost time for the main event. I looked up, meeting Derek's terrified eyes. "I am not signing your useless piece of paper," I said, my voice dropping to a low, icy register that made the smile vanish from Sienna's face. "And I am certainly not leaving. I am not leaving until the presentation." Derek's jaw tightened so hard I thought his teeth might crack. He realized he could not physically force me out without causing the exact scene he was trying to avoid. "Fine," he snapped violently, adjusting his tie. "Stand in the back and keep your mouth shut. Watch how a real business operates." Derek turned on his heel and marched toward the small, elevated stage at the front of the banquet hall. Patricia and Sienna followed closely behind him, taking their reserved seats in the front row like royalty. Sienna made sure to position her stolen emerald green Hermes bag right on the table in front of her for everyone to admire. I stayed near the back of the room, holding my stained crimson silk dress with one hand and my designer clutch with the other. I found a quiet spot near a massive floral arrangement and watched as the man who had stolen my life prepared to steal from everyone else. Derek stepped up to the wooden podium and tapped the microphone. A sharp feedback noise echoed through the speakers, instantly silencing the room. The clinking of glasses stopped, and all the wealthy investors, local business owners, and extended family members turned their attention to the front. Derek smiled. It was the exact same charismatic, boyish smile he used to charm me a decade ago. It was a weapon perfectly designed to disarm rational thought. "Thank you all for joining us tonight," Derek began, his voice projecting smoothly across the elegant room. "We are here to celebrate more than just a new business venture. We are here to celebrate financial liberation. For years, I watched hardworking people tie their money up in slow, traditional investments. I watched them settle for single-digit returns while the elite multiplied their wealth overnight. I decided it was time to change that. I decided it was time to bring my family and my friends along for the ride." He clicked a small wireless remote, and the massive projector screen behind him lit up. A sleek, professionally designed graphic appeared displaying the words, "Family Investment Fund," in bold gold lettering. Below the logo was a series of charts showing a staggering upward trajectory. "3 weeks ago, I liquidated my largest real estate asset," Derek announced, pointing confidently at the screen. "I sold a $2 million property in Bellevue to provide the seed capital for this exact fund." I put my own money on the line because I believe in the aggressive cryptocurrency algorithms we have developed. And as you can see from the charts behind me, that seed capital has already generated a 30% return in less than a month. A collective murmur of awe swept through the room. I watched my mother Patricia beam with pride, clapping her hands together. Rachel was nodding eagerly, looking around at the wealthy guests to make sure they saw how important her brother-in-law was. They were completely mesmerized by the colorful lines on the screen. But I was not looking at the colorful lines. I was looking at the small table next to the podium, where Derek's laptop was connected to the venue projection system via a single thick black cable. I want to offer you an exclusive opportunity tonight. Derek continued, his voice growing more intense and persuasive. We are opening the fund to private outside investors for the next 24 hours only. If you write a check tonight, you are getting in on the ground floor of an absolute financial revolution. Do not wait for the market to leave you behind. Open your checkbooks and let us build generational wealth together. Several men in expensive suits immediately reached into their breast pockets, pulling out leather-bound checkbooks. The trap was closing on innocent people. It was time. I unclasped my designer clutch and pulled out my iPad. I stepped out from the shadows of the floral arrangement and began walking down the center aisle of the banquet hall. My heels clicked rhythmically against the hardwood floor, cutting through the soft, ambient music playing overhead. Derek saw me approaching, and his confident smile faltered. He gripped the edges of the podium, his knuckles turning white. He leaned away from the microphone and tried to wave me off frantically, motioning for me to go back to my corner. I completely ignored him. I reached the stage and walked directly up the 3 wooden steps. Derek was frozen in panic, unable to make a scene in front of the people currently holding pens over their checkbooks. I stepped right past him and approached the small table. I reached down, grabbed the thick black display cable, and pulled it straight out of his laptop. The massive screen behind him went completely black. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. "What are you doing?" Derek hissed, lunging forward to grab my wrist. I smoothly stepped out of his reach and plugged the display cable directly into my iPad. Then I reached over and pulled the microphone right out of his hand. I turned to face the room of bewildered investors. My mother had jumped out of her seat, her face red with rage. Rachel was shouting something, but I blocked out the noise. Derek was just talking about the $2 million Bellevue property he supposedly sold to fund this venture. I announced, my voice echoing loudly and clearly through the speakers. He asked you to open your checkbooks based on that massive liquidation. So let us talk about real returns. Let us talk about where that seed capital actually came from. I tapped the screen of my iPad. The projector flashed back to life, illuminating the entire front wall of the banquet hall. But instead of a sleek logo or a fake crypto chart, a stark black and white legal document appeared. At the top of the screen, in bold, undeniable print, were the words, "Revocable Living Trust." The entire room froze. The entire room froze. I turned away from the screen and looked directly into the sea of shocked faces. 6 months ago, I transferred my entire estate into that trust, I explained, my voice steady and completely devoid of emotion. Derek forged my signature on a residential deed transfer, but he had absolutely no legal authority to sell a property owned by a separate legal entity. The sale he just bragged about to all of you is completely void. Derek was breathing heavily, his chest heaving as he stared at the document on the screen. "Natalie, stop," he begged, his voice cracking. "You are ruining everything." "I am just getting started, Derek," I replied. I tapped the iPad screen again. A new document appeared. It was the corporate registry for Apex Holdings, the shell company that supposedly bought the house. I want everyone to pay very close attention to the ultimate beneficial owner listed on this federal document, I announced, pointing at the massive projection. Derek used a discount online broker to rush his fraudulent sale. He sold the house to a Delaware shell company called Apex Holdings. He thought he found a rich cash buyer who did not ask questions. But he did not do his due diligence. If he had, he would have realized that I am the sole owner of Apex Holdings. A collective gasp echoed through the banquet hall. Several investors in the back row actually stood up from their tables, staring at the screen in pure disbelief. Derek unknowingly sold my own house to me. I continued, letting the sheer weight of the truth sink into the room. I secured a hard money loan under my corporate umbrella and let him forge his way into a massive federal trap. Every single dollar sitting in the family investment fund right now is the direct result of a fraudulent interstate wire transfer. The silence in the room shattered. The wealthy business owners who had been holding their checkbooks just seconds ago frantically shoved them back into their pockets. Men and women began grabbing their coats, pushing their chairs back from the tables. Nobody wanted to be in the same room as a confessed federal wire fraud scheme. One of the older investors, a man who had nearly written a check for $100,000, marched right up to the stage. "You are a complete fraud," he shouted at Derek Face. "I am calling my legal team right now and making sure the state attorney general knows exactly what you tried to pull tonight." Rachel pushed her way to the front of the stage, her face twisted in a mixture of rage and terror. "You are lying," she screamed, pointing her finger at me. "You are just jealous because Derek gave Mom and me a cut of the profits. We are legitimate investors." I looked down at my sister, feeling absolutely no pity. I stepped closer to the edge of the stage, looming over her. "You are not an investor, Rachel," I said, my voice cutting through the rising panic in the room. I pointed directly at the shiny new watch on her wrist. "The $200,000 he gave you is stolen money. That Rolex you are wearing was bought with illicit funds. The SUV you drove here in was paid for by wire fraud." Rachel physically recoiled, pulling her arm back and covering the watch with her other hand, as if the metal had suddenly burned her skin. She looked around wildly, realizing that the wealthy crowd was now looking at her with absolute disgust. I shifted my gaze to my mother, who was still standing near her chair, completely paralyzed. "And you, Patricia," I said, using her first name to sever whatever maternal bond was left between us. "You mortgaged your fully paid-off retirement home to give this man $500,000. You wired that equity directly into an account that is currently frozen and under active investigation by the Federal Bureau." Patricia's legs seemed to give out. She collapsed back into her chair, her hands covering her face. She let out a loud, wailing sob that echoed over the murmurs of the fleeing guests. "My money?" she cried out, rocking back and forth. "My house is gone." Patricia looked up from her hands, her makeup running down her cheeks in dark black streaks. "Natalie, please," she begged, her voice trembling with desperation. "You have to stop this. Tell them it is a mistake. I am your mother. You cannot let me lose my home. You lost your home the moment you decided my cheating husband was a better investment than your own daughter," I replied, my tone completely unyielding. "You watched him lock me out of my own property, and you handed me a $10,000 check to go live in a studio apartment. This is exactly what family loyalty looks like, Patricia. You tied yourself to a sinking ship, and now you get to drown with it." "It is all gone," I confirmed, looking at Sienna, who was desperately trying to hide her emerald green crocodile bag behind her back. "Every car, every watch, every designer bag. It is all classified as stolen federal property, and the government is going to seize every last penny." I looked toward the back of the room where Kendrick was still sitting. He was the only person who was not panicking. He took a slow sip of his sparkling water and gave me a slight salute. He had tried to warn them. He had tried to save Rachel and Patricia from their own toxic greed, but they had chosen to blindly follow a criminal instead. Now they were paying the ultimate price. Derek fell to his knees on the wooden stage. He grabbed the edge of the podium, burying his face in his arms. He was completely broken. The arrogant man who had locked me out in the rain, who had offered me a pathetic $50,000 bribe just 20 minutes ago, was now sobbing uncontrollably in front of Seattle elite. The room was in total chaos now. People were shouting, rushing toward the heavy mahogany doors to escape the sinking ship. I stood calmly in the center of the storm, watching the absolute destruction of the people who had tried to destroy me. Right on cue, the screech of heavy sirens pierced through the thick glass windows of the restaurant. The deafening wail cut through the shouting and panic inside the banquet hall. The guests who had been rushing toward the heavy mahogany doors suddenly froze in their tracks. Red and blue lights flashed wildly against the elegant crystal chandeliers, painting the entire room in the stark, unforgiving colors of a federal raid. The doors at the back of the room did not just open, they burst apart with massive force. A specialized team of federal agents poured into the room. They were not local beat cops. They wore dark tactical gear with the bold yellow letters FBI and IRS printed across their ballistic vests. Their presence instantly sucked all the remaining air out of the room. Derek was still kneeling on the stage, but he had managed to grab a half-empty champagne glass from the podium in a desperate attempt to steady his violently shaking hands. When the first wave of federal agents stormed the room, the glass slipped from his fingers. It hit the marble floor and shattered into 100 jagged pieces. The sharp sound of breaking crystal echoed loudly, but it was immediately drowned out by the authoritative shouts of the agents securing the perimeter. "Nobody move," a senior agent commanded, his voice booming through a handheld megaphone. "Keep your hands visible and step away from the exits. This is a coordinated federal operation." I recognized the senior agent immediately. It was Agent Miller, the man I had been feeding financial evidence to for the past 6 months. He walked down the center aisle with the calm, steady authority of a man who held all the winning cards. The wealthy investors parted for him like the Red Sea, pressing their backs against the walls to distance themselves from the blast radius of Derek's massive crimes. They wanted absolutely nothing to do with a man who was about to face decades in federal prison. Agent Miller stopped right in front of the stage. He looked down at Derek, who was practically crawling backward away from the shattered glass. "Derek, you are under arrest for aggravated identity theft, federal wire fraud, and bank fraud," Agent Miller announced, pulling a thick stack of warrants from his tactical jacket. 2 heavily armed agents stepped onto the 100-foot line. The first agent was a man in his late 20s, with a shaved head and a thick beard. The second agent was a woman in her early 30s, with short hair and a confident smile. They both had assault rifles slung over their shoulders and bulletproof vests on their chests. The first agent spoke first, his voice deep and commanding. "We have a warrant for your arrest," he said. "You are under arrest for the murder of your wife and child." The second agent nodded, his voice calm and controlled. "We have a warrant for your arrest," he said. "You are under arrest for the murder of your wife and child." The first agent spoke first, his voice deep and commanding. "We have a warrant for your arrest," he said. "You are under arrest for the murder of your wife and child." The second agent nodded, his voice calm and controlled. "We have a warrant for your arrest," he said. "You are under arrest for the murder of your wife and child." The first agent spoke first, his voice deep and commanding. "We have a warrant for your arrest," he said. "You are under arrest for the murder of your wife and child." The second agent nodded, his voice calm and controlled. "We have a warrant for your arrest," he said. "You are under arrest for the murder of your wife and child." The first agent spoke first, his voice deep and commanding. "We have a warrant for your arrest," he said. "You are under arrest for the murder of your wife and child." The second agent nodded, his voice calm and controlled. "We have a warrant for your arrest," he said. "You are under arrest for the murder of your wife and child." The first agent spoke first, his voice deep and commanding. "We have a warrant for your arrest," he said. "You are under arrest for the murder of your wife and child." The second agent nodded, his voice calm and controlled. "We have a warrant for your arrest," he said. "You are under arrest for the murder of your wife and child." The first agent spoke first, his voice deep and commanding. "We have a warrant for your arrest," he said. "You are under arrest for the murder of your wife and child." The second agent nodded, his voice calm and controlled. "We have a warrant for your arrest," he said. "You are under arrest for the murder of your wife and child." The first agent spoke first, his voice deep and commanding. "We have a warrant for your arrest," he said. You are under arrest for the murder of your wife and child. The second agent nodded, his voice calm and controlled. We have a warrant for your arrest, he said. You are under arrest for the murder of your wife and child. The first agent spoke first, his voice. Two heavily armed agents stepped onto the wooden stage, grabbed him by the arms, and hauled him to his feet. They kicked his legs apart and patted him down before slamming cold steel handcuffs around his wrists. The loud metallic click of the locking mechanism echoed sharply through the silent room. Wait! Derek finally managed to choke out his eyes, darting frantically toward me. She set me up. Natalie set me up. You have to arrest her too. She knew about the house sale. Agent Miller did not even blink. We know exactly what she did, Derek. She provided the federal government with a flawless forensic accounting dossier that mapped every single dollar you stole. You sold a house you did not own to a company she legally controlled. You did all the heavy lifting for us. You essentially arrested yourself. While Derek was being read his Miranda rights, the rest of the tactical team began moving systematically through the crowd. They were not just there to arrest Derek. They had a comprehensive list of physical assets to seize and co-conspirators to question. An IRS agent approached my mother, Patricia, who was still slumped in her chair, sobbing uncontrollably. Mom, we are going to need you to step outside for official questioning, the agent said firmly. We have bank records indicating you transferred $500,000 of home equity into a fraudulent offshore account. Patricia looked up, her face completely, utterly destroyed by the reality of her own greed. She reached a shaking hand out toward me. Natalie, please tell them I did not know, she pleaded, her voice cracking. Tell them I am a victim in all of this. I looked down at her, feeling a cold sense of absolute finality. You were not a victim, Patricia, I said softly but clearly so she could hear every word. You were a willing participant. You wanted to get rich quick, and you chose to trust a thief over your own daughter. You made your bed. Now you have to sleep in it. Across the room, Rachel was trying to slip out a side door, but a female agent blocked her path. Rachel was hyperventilating, clutching her wrist tightly to hide her new jewelry. The agent grabbed Rachel's arm and forcefully unclasped the shiny new Rolex she had been flaunting all night. This item was purchased with illicit federal funds, the agent stated, dropping the expensive watch into a clear plastic evidence bag. It is now property of the United States government. Rachel let out a guttural scream of absolute despair, watching her fabricated wealth literally get bagged and tagged. She looked over at Kendrick, who was still sitting calmly at his table in the back. He just shook his head and took another sip of his water, completely detached from the woman who had ruined her own life. The illusion was completely shattered, and the cleanup had officially begun. The illusion was completely shattered, and the cleanup had officially begun. The sheer magnitude of the devastation finally registered in Patricia's eyes. She was not just embarrassed in front of her wealthy peers. She was financially ruined. She lunged forward, grabbing the sleeve of the IRS investigator who was logging her identification information into a federal tablet. You have to reverse the wire transfer, she shrieked, her voice echoing sharply off the high crystal chandeliers. Call the bank right now. Tell them it was a massive mistake. I am a retired woman. I paid off that house 10 years ago. You cannot let the bank take my home over a simple misunderstanding. The federal agent gently but firmly detached her trembling hands from his tactical uniform. Mom, the funds have already been frozen as part of a massive federal indictment, he explained without a single trace of sympathy in his voice. You willingly transferred your home equity into an unverified offshore account linked to a known wire fraud scheme. The government does not reverse transfers for bad judgment. You will need to retain a criminal defense attorney immediately, and you should begin preparing for the bank foreclosure process. Patricia let out a sound that barely sounded human, a hollow, devastating gasp of pure terror. She collapsed onto the carpeted floor of the banquet hall, burying her face in her hands. She had traded her secure, peaceful retirement for a phantom fund, and now she was facing total homelessness. But her cries were quickly overshadowed by Rachel. My sister was now on her knees, weeping hysterically near the ice sculpture. A female FBI agent was standing over her, instructing her to remove her diamond earrings and the matching luxury necklace Derek had gifted her earlier that week. "I did not know anything," Rachel wailed, struggling to undo the delicate clasp of the necklace with violently shaking hands. "He told us he was a financial genius. He told us we were going to be millionaires. I am a mother. You cannot treat me like a common criminal." The agent held open a clear plastic evidence bag, her expression completely stoic. "Ignorance of the law does not exempt you from possessing stolen federal property," the agent stated flatly. "Drop the necklace in the bag, please. We can do this the easy way, or I can arrest you for obstruction and confiscate it at the station." Rachel let the expensive diamonds fall into the plastic bag. Her perfect makeup was completely ruined, her arrogant facade entirely stripped away, leaving nothing but a desperate, greedy shell. She looked up, searching the crowd of remaining agents and bewildered guests for anyone who would pity her. That is when Kendrick stepped out from the shadows near the back of the room. He walked down the center aisle with slow, measured steps. He did not look angry, he did not look vindictive. He just looked incredibly tired, but completely resolved. The few remaining guests parted for him, recognizing the quiet, undeniable authority in his posture. Rachel saw him approaching, and a desperate spark of hope lit up her tear-streaked face. "Kendrick." She gasped, crawling forward a few inches on the floor. "Kendrick. Please tell them. Tell them I did not know anything. Tell them Derek manipulated me. You have to help me fix this. We can hire a good lawyer. We can fight this together and get our life back." Kendrick stopped walking. He stood over her, looking down at the woman he had loved, the woman who had called him a cowardly black man just days ago because he refused to break the law to satisfy her endless greed. He reached inside his tailored charcoal suit jacket and pulled out a thick manila folder. He did not offer his hand to help her up. Instead, he dropped the folder directly onto the floor, right in front of her trembling knees. "What is this?" Rachel asked, her voice shaking as she stared at the heavy paper. "Divorce papers," Kendrick said, his deep voice cutting through the noise of the federal raid with absolute clarity. "I filed them yesterday morning. My lawyer already served the electronic copies to your email, but I wanted to make sure you received the physical copies tonight." Rachel stared at the folder as if it were a live explosive. "Kendrick, no!" she sobbed, reaching out to grab his pant leg. "You are my husband. You are supposed to protect me. I protected our son." Kendrick replied, taking a swift step back so she could not touch him. "I tried to protect you too. I begged you not to take out that fraudulent loan. I warned you about Derek and his fake portfolio, but you called me a fool. You told me I was holding you back from your true potential. Well, Rachel here is your true potential. You are sitting on the floor of a restaurant begging federal agents not to take the jewelry you bought with stolen money. You chose a con artist over your own family." He looked around the chaotic room, taking in the sight of Derek in handcuffs and Patricia sobbing in the corner. "I told you so," Kendrick said softly but firmly. It was the quietest phrase he had spoken all night, but it hit Rachel harder than a physical blow. She wrapped her arms around her stomach and wailed, dropping her forehead against the divorce papers on the floor. Kendrick turned around. He did not say another word. He did not look back. He walked straight out of the banquet hall, the heavy mahogany doors closing behind him with a solid final thud. I stood near the stage watching him leave. I felt a deep sense of the room where the final acts of this spectacular collapse were unfolding. Sienna had managed to back herself into a corner near the mahogany bar. She was clutching her emerald green crocodile Hermes Birkin bag to her chest as if it were an infant. Her eyes darted wildly around the room, watching the federal agents systematically dismantle the life she thought she had stolen. A female FBI agent approached her, holding out a clear plastic evidence bag that was comically large compared to the delicate designer purse. "Mom, hand over the bag," the agent said, her voice completely devoid of patience. "It is listed on the federal asset forfeiture warrant." "No." Sienna shrieked, her voice pitching into a hysterical frequency that made several people wince. "You cannot take this. It is mine. Derek bought it for me. It is a gift. You are violating my rights." The agent did not argue. She simply stepped forward, grabbed the thick leather handles of the bag, and yanked it out of Sienna's grasp with a swift, practiced motion. Sienna let out a loud, dramatic wail as the agent unceremoniously shoved the $40,000 masterpiece into the plastic evidence bag and slapped a bright red federal barcode sticker across the front. "It was bought with the proceeds of federal wire fraud," the agent explained coldly. "That means it was never yours to begin with. If you interfere with a federal seizure again, I will arrest you for obstruction of justice. Step back." Sienna stumbled backward, leaning against the wooden bar for support. She looked down at her empty hands and then over at Derek. The man she had bragged about, the man she claimed treated her like a queen, was currently sitting on the floor surrounded by federal agents. She suddenly realized that without the stolen money, Derek was absolutely nothing. He was just a fraud in a tailored suit, and she was just a mistress holding a massive amount of credit card debt. Derek watched Sienna lose the bag, and something inside him completely snapped. The sheer reality of his situation finally crushed the last remaining fragments of his narcissistic delusion. He looked at the heavy mahogany doors at the front, which were completely blocked by armed agents. He looked at Agent Miller, who was busy organizing the evidence logs. Then he looked at the swinging wooden doors leading into the restaurant kitchen. It was a desperate, pathetic calculation. He actually thought he could outrun a coordinated federal raid. Derek scrambled to his feet, his expensive leather shoes slipping wildly against the polished marble floor. He lunged toward the kitchen doors, pumping his arms in a blind panic. He did not even make it 10 feet. Two tactical agents moved with terrifying speed. They converged on him from opposite sides. One agent grabbed Derek's shoulder, spinning him around, while the other hit him squarely in the chest. They drove him hard into the ground. The impact echoed through the banquet hall as Derek hit the marble floor with a heavy, sickening thud. The breath was knocked out of his lungs in a sharp, violent gasp. "Do not move a muscle," an agent barked, pressing his knee firmly between Derek's shoulder blades. They pulled his arms behind his back, crossing his wrists. The sharp, metallic click of the steel handcuffs locking into place was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of absolute, undeniable justice. They hauled him up onto his knees. His suit jacket was torn, his tie was skewed, and his face was pale and slick with terrified sweat. Agent Miller stepped forward, looking down at the broken man. "Derek, you have the right to remain silent." Agent Miller recited, his voice echoing off the crystal chandeliers above. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. Do you understand these rights as I have read them to you?" Derek did not answer Agent Miller. He was hyperventilating, his chest heaving violently. He slowly lifted his head, and his eyes found mine. The look in his eyes was one of sheer, unadulterated terror. He finally understood the magnitude of the trap he had walked into. He realized that the woman he had underestimated, the woman he had tried to leave destitute, had completely engineered his absolute destruction. I walked slowly across the marble floor, my crimson silk dress gliding around my ankles. The federal agents did not stop me. I stepped right up to him and crouched down, getting perfectly at eye level with the man who had tried to steal my life. He looked at me, his lips trembling. "Natalie, please," he whispered, his voice breaking. I looked him dead in the eye, feeling nothing but cold, brilliant victory. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. "I told you, Derek," I whispered softly, ensuring he was the only one who could hear the final nail being hammered into his coffin. "I paid for everything." The federal justice system moves with a slow, deliberate, grinding precision, but when the government has a perfectly documented paper trail, the final outcome is completely inescapable. 8 months after the dramatic raid at the restaurant, I sat quietly in the back row of a federal courtroom in downtown Seattle. Derek was brought out wearing a standard-issue orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. The stark uniform was a massive downgrade from the expensive tailored suits he used to buy with my stolen money. He looked older, smaller, and completely stripped of his arrogant charm. The judge did not show him a single ounce of leniency. Because of the sheer volume of the financial crimes, the blatant forgery, and the deliberate attempt to defraud multiple investors, Derek was sentenced to 15 years in a federal penitentiary without the possibility of early parole. There was no dramatic outburst from him when the heavy wooden gavel finally fell. He simply lowered his head as the armed bailiffs led him away to a cage made of iron bars and cold concrete. Sienna did not even bother to show up to his sentencing hearing. The exact moment the federal agents seized her designer bags and froze the fraudulent bank accounts, she abandoned him entirely. But running away did not save her from the consequences of her own greed. She had willingly co-signed several massive credit lines to help fund their fake luxury lifestyle before the raid. With the illicit cash completely seized by the government, she was left drowning in hundreds of thousands of dollars of legitimate credit card debt. The last I heard, through mutual acquaintances, she had filed for bankruptcy and moved back into her parents' cramped basement. The collateral damage extended exactly to the people who deserved it. My mother, Patricia, lost her 4-bedroom retirement home. The bank finalized the foreclosure process exactly as the federal investigators had warned her they would. On the day the official eviction notice was posted on her front door, my phone rang. I answered it and heard her sobbing hysterically, begging me to let her move into my house. She promised she had changed and swore she would be a supportive mother if I just gave her one more chance to prove her loyalty. I did not yell, and I did not argue with her delusion. I calmly reminded her that she made her choice when she handed me a $10,000 check and told me to go rent a studio apartment. I hung up the phone and immediately changed my phone number, enforcing a permanent and irreversible no-contact boundary. Rachel faced an equally brutal reality check. Kendrick finalized his divorce quickly and efficiently. Because of Rachel's documented attempt to commit mortgage fraud, the family court judge granted Kendrick full primary physical and legal custody of their son. Rachel was strictly ordered to pay monthly child support. Stripped of her stolen jewelry, her luxury SUV, and her comfortable suburban life, she was forced to move into a cheap rundown motel on the outskirts of the city. She works long shifts at a retail store now, and every month a large portion of her minimum wage paycheck is legally garnished and sent directly to Kendrick to provide for the child she took for granted. As for me, the resolution was quietly beautiful. Once the federal injunction officially cleared the title registry, I moved back into my $2 million home in Bellevue. I threw out every single piece of furniture Derek had ever touched and completely redesigned the interior to match my own taste. I also massively upgraded the security system, installing state-of-the-art biometric fingerprint scanners on every exterior door. Nobody was ever going to lock me out of my own life again. On my first night back in the house, I walked out onto the expansive wooden balcony. The air was crisp, and the dark waters of Lake Washington beautifully reflected the glowing lights of the Seattle skyline. I carried a crystal flute in my hand, filled with the very same vintage Napa Valley champagne my family had tried to use to toast my downfall. I took a slow, deliberate sip, enjoying the crisp, perfect taste of absolute freedom. They had all looked at my success and thought it was something they could simply pack up and steal. They thought they could strip away my property, my money, and my dignity and leave me with absolutely nothing. But they forgot one crucial detail. They thought they were stealing my foundation, not realizing that I was the architect. I built my wealth through late nights, hard work, and ironclad boundaries. The ultimate revenge was not just sending a narcissistic con artist to a federal prison. It was proving to myself and to the world that a woman's worth and a woman's wealth belong entirely and unapologetically to her. Have you ever let someone dig their own grave? Tell me your stories in the comments below. If my journey resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories about surviving toxic families and reclaiming your power. Remember that your peace is worth protecting at all costs. Thank you for listening. The most powerful lesson to take away from this story is that absolute silence and careful strategic preparation are your greatest weapons against toxic people. When faced with deep betrayal from the very people who are supposed to love us, our first natural instinct is usually to react emotionally. We want to scream, cry, and demand immediate justice right in that exact moment. However, people who thrive on manipulation actually feed on those emotional explosions. In the story, the ex-husband and the enabling family members desperately wanted a public breakdown. They wanted the protagonist to beg for scraps because her desperation would validate their false sense of superiority and control. By refusing to give them that emotional reaction, she stripped away their power completely. Instead of wasting her energy on pointless arguments, she channeled all her focus into silently building an ironclad fortress around her life and her finances. This teaches us a profound truth about self-worth and true independence. You do not need to attend every single argument you are invited to. When dealing with narcissists or a toxic family dynamic, explaining your side of the story is often a trap. The best defense is to quietly secure your own future, establish permanent boundaries, and allow their own reckless greed to be their ultimate undoing. True power is not about proving the haters wrong loudly. It is about protecting your peace and letting the natural consequences of their actions catch up to them. You are the architect of your own life, and no one can take away the solid foundation you build for yourself. If you are currently dealing with a toxic environment, please take a step back today and focus entirely on building your own secure future instead of fighting a pointless emotional battle right now.